The buyer put both hands on the scarred cabinet and gave it one hard pull. Nothing moved except his shoulders. "It's bolted," he said. Sean Perry stood beside the auctioneer's folding table, holding a yellow copy of the lot sheet, then unbolted. The buyer crouched and looked beneath the cabinet. Two steel bolts ran through its base into the concrete floor. More bolts disappeared through the back and into the workshop wall. He stood again. "No, that's part of the building. It's a cabinet full of old junk. It wasn't listed with the movable lots." The auctioneer lowered his pen. People had been walking through Alan Perry's workshop all morning, opening drawers and testing switches. Now, several of them had stopped to listen. Martha could feel their attention without looking at them. At 68, she knew the difference between being watched and being witnessed. She also knew Sean hated both. He tapped the paper with one finger. "I sold the contents of the shop." "You sold the numbered lots," the buyer said. "That cabinet doesn't have a number." Martha stood near the side door with her coat buttoned to the throat. The workshop heater had failed again, and each breath came out faintly white. She kept one hand on the cabinet because it was the only thing in the room that still belonged to her. Everything else had acquired a paper tag. Alan's table saw wore number 14. His jointer was 19. The long workbench where he had flattened cherry boards for nearly 40 years was 6. Even the dented metal stool by the sharpening station had a white tag tied through one leg. The cabinet had no tag because Alan's will had named it separately. Sean turned toward his mother. "Tell him he can take it." Martha looked at the buyer, then at the bolts. "No," she said. "It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be." Sean folded the lot sheet once, very sharply. Across the room, Lauren Perry stared at the concrete floor. That was the moment the room changed. Not because Martha knew what the cabinet was worth. She didn't. As far as she knew, it held old plane irons, sanding blocks, screws and coffee cans, and whatever Alan had pushed to the back during the last years of his life. But the cabinet was hers, and Sean had just asked her to give it away in front of strangers. 11 days earlier, he had sat at her kitchen table and tried to make the same thing sound reasonable. Rain ticked against the window over the sink. A brown stain had spread across the ceiling since the last storm, and Martha had placed a dishpan beneath the slow drip. The house on Perry Road had been paid for, but paid for didn't mean free. The roof was failing over the back bedrooms. 2 upstairs outlets had gone dead. The furnace made a knocking sound every time it started. Martha had estimates in a blue folder beside her elbow. She hadn't shown them to Sean or Lauren. She already knew how the conversation would go. Sean had brought printed auction papers. Lauren had brought coffee in cardboard cups, including one for Martha, though she had added the wrong amount of cream. "We've waited 2 years," Sean said. "Nobody can say we rushed this." Martha looked at the papers without touching them. Alan had died in 2024 after a short illness that somehow made every day feel long. For the first few months, nobody had asked what would happen to the workshop. Sean came on Sundays and carried boxes from the hospital equipment company. Lauren sorted Alan's clothes and cried over a jacket she had never liked. Then the estate papers were finished. The house belonged to Martha. She and Alan had owned it together, and it became hers when he died. The workshop stood behind the house, connected by a covered walkway Alan had built himself. The building was hers too. The business equipment and inventory were different. Alan had left those to Sean and Lauren. He had believed one of them might continue the work, though he hadn't required it. Neither wanted to. Sean owned a small commercial flooring company that had lost 2 large contracts. He spoke about cash flow and equipment payments. Lauren worked in medical billing and lived across the river. She wanted the estate settled because every trip to the workshop brought back the months when Alan had been sick. Martha understood both explanations. Understanding them didn't make them generous. "I can run the shop," she said. Sean sat back. "Mom, I restored furniture before either of you were born. That isn't what I mean." "What do you mean?" He glanced at Lauren, hoping she would answer. Lauren pulled the cardboard sleeve off her coffee cup and began tearing it along the seam. Sean tried again. "The shop hasn't made real money in years. Your father stopped taking large orders when he got sick, and before that, he was barely keeping up. He was 72 and doing the work of 3 people. That's exactly my point." Martha let the silence sit there. Sean's face changed when he realized how the sentence had sounded, but he didn't take it back. She opened the blue folder and laid out the estimates. "The roof over the house needs work. The wiring needs work. The furnace may last another winter, or it may not. Repair jobs from the shop could cover part of that. Lauren stopped tearing the cup sleeve. How much are we talking about? More than I have. Sean looked at the first page. You can sell the house. Martha watched a drop strike the empty dishpan. It made a small, hollow tap. This is my home, she said. You wouldn't have to go far. A condo would be easier. For whom? Come on, Mom. That's not fair. No, it's a question. He pushed the estimate back across the table. Sean had been restless since he arrived. His right foot kept moving beneath the chair. Martha knew he owed money. She didn't know how much because he answered direct questions with phrases like temporary squeeze and receivables problem. Lauren finally spoke. The equipment belongs to us. That's what Dad decided. Yes. And we agreed to sell it. Yes. So, what are you asking? I'm asking you to lease it to me for 6 months. I'll insure it. I'll pay you from the jobs. Sean shook his head before she finished. I can't wait 6 months. Lauren looked at him. You said we had time. We did. Now we don't. There it was. Not the full truth, but enough of it. Martha closed the blue folder. She had spent weeks preparing a business plan in a spiral notebook. She had called 3 former customers. 2 had chairs waiting for repair, and 1 had a walnut dining table damaged by a leaking pipe. Fred Moss had offered to help with estimates. None of that mattered if Sean needed an auction more than he needed to hear her. The sale is already scheduled, isn't it? She asked. Lauren's eyes moved toward Sean. He pressed his lips together. I spoke with an auction company. When? Last week. You came here to tell me, not ask me. We don't need permission to sell what Dad left us. No, you don't. That answer made him more uneasy than an argument would have. Martha reached for the papers. The auction was set for the following Saturday, with inspection beginning at 8 in the morning. Equipment, lumber, hardware, unfinished pieces, and general shop inventory would be sold in numbered lots. At the bottom, a sentence said all remaining property had to be removed within 21 days. She read it twice. What does remaining property mean? Sean leaned forward. Anything left in the shop after the buyers clear out. The wall cabinet is mine. It's not worth moving. That wasn't my question. Lauren looked up then. Dad did leave her the cabinet. Sean rubbed his forehead. Fine. The cabinet is hers. And I have 21 days to remove it? We need the building empty. Martha looked toward the back window. Through Rain Street glass, the workshop stood under its low, dark roof. Alan had painted it green years ago. The color had faded on the south wall, but the door was still the deep red Martha had chosen. You don't own the building, she said. No, but we can't be responsible for things left in it forever. You haven't been responsible for the building at all. Mom, please don't turn this into something else. She almost laughed. Sean had already turned it into something else. He had turned his father's working life into numbered lots and given his mother a deadline inside her own property. Lauren reached across the table, but Martha moved the auction papers before her daughter's hand arrived. I want a complete inventory, Martha said. The auction company does that. I want my own. Sean sighed. Why? Because your father kept customer pieces in that shop. Fred left personal tools there. Some things don't belong to you. We'll sort it. You thought the cabinet belonged to you 5 minutes ago. I said fine, and I heard you. Lauren put both hands around her cup. She had wanted this meeting finished quickly. She had imagined discomfort, not resistance. In her mind, selling the tools meant ending the long, unfinished business of Alan's death. She hadn't considered that Martha might see the sale as another loss still happening. Sean stood and gathered his coat. The auctioneer is coming Tuesday to tag everything. Be there if you want. I will. We're not delaying the sale. I didn't ask you to. He waited, perhaps expecting her to soften. Martha had spent much of his life softening things for him. Bad grades became a difficult semester. A broken window became an accident. A loan became help until business improved. She didn't soften this. After they left, she poured the untouched coffee into the sink. Then she carried the dishpan upstairs, emptied the rainwater into the bathtub, and set it back beneath the stain. The workshop key hung on a hook beside the rear door. Martha put on Alan's old canvas coat and crossed the covered walkway. Rain blew through a gap near the gutter and struck her cheek. The shop smelled of cold sawdust, machine oil, and the damp mineral odor of concrete. She switched on the lights. Only the fixtures over the center benches came on. The tubes near the finishing room flickered twice and stayed dark. Alan's wall cabinet stood beyond the main bench. It was nearly 6 feet long, built from heavy pine and painted gray. The doors were scarred by clamps and tool handles. One brass pull had been replaced with a loop of cord. Nobody would have called it fine cabinet making. Alan hadn't built it to be admired. Martha opened the left door. Shallow shelves held sharpening stones, small jigs, loose hinges, and jars of screws. The right side contained wooden planes and molding samples, most of them worn from ordinary work. Nothing explained why Alan had mentioned the cabinet in his will. She tried to shift it. It didn't move. Martha knelt carefully, one palm on the concrete to protect her balance. The bolts through the base were dark with rust. She found 2 more inside the cabinet, driven through the back rail. Alan had secured it as if Pittsburgh might slide downhill without warning. She took out her phone and photographed every bolt. Then she photographed the cabinet doors, the surrounding wall, and the floor beneath it. Her hands had begun to ache from the cold, so she tucked the phone into her coat and stood slowly. A small vise sat on the engraving bench 10 feet away. Fred's initials were stamped into its base. Sean had included the bench in the auction photographs. Martha called Fred. He answered after the 4th ring. "You all right?" "No," she said, "but I know what I'm doing next." Fred was quiet. "Sean and Lauren are auctioning the shop," she continued. "Your engraving vise is in one of the pictures. That vise is mine." "I know. When are they coming to tag things?" "Tuesday. I'll be there Monday morning." Martha looked at the wall cabinet again. "Bring penetrating oil. And the longest breaker bar you have. What are we moving?" The one thing Alan made sure they couldn't carry away easily. Before she left the shop, Martha found a piece of cardboard and wrote her name on it in thick black marker. She tied it to the cabinet handle with twine, then photographed that too. On Monday morning, Fred arrived at 8 with a red metal toolbox and 2 paper cups of coffee. He carried himself carefully on wet concrete, favoring his left knee, though he would have denied it if Martha mentioned it. He handed her 1 cup, 1 cream. "You remembered. I've been getting your coffee wrong for 38 years. Eventually a man learns." Fred was 66, broad through the shoulders, with gray hair he cut himself. He had worked beside Alan long enough to know which drawers stuck in damp weather, and which light switch gave a small shock if touched with a wet hand. He set his toolbox beside the cabinet and looked at Martha's cardboard sign. "That ought to confuse anybody who can't read. Sean can read." "I wasn't talking about Sean." Martha gave him a look. Fred opened his coffee and drank from it. "Too early?" he asked. "Much." They began with the engraving vise. It was a compact iron tool with smooth jaws and a wooden handle darkened by Fred's palm. His initials appeared beneath the base, but initials weren't proof of ownership. Alan marked customer tools, borrowed tools, and even certain jigs that belonged to the shop. Fred removed the vise from the bench and turned it over. "There should be another mark," he said. He rubbed grime from the bottom with his thumb. Beneath the mounting plate was a row of shallow numbers. Martha recognized them. Purchase date, month and year. Alan made me mark everything after we spent 3 days arguing over a mortising chisel. "That was your chisel." "It was. You apologized anyway." "He was my boss. He was wrong." Fred looked at her over the vise. "You told me to apologize." Martha remembered. Alan had been behind on 2 orders, tired, and in no mood to be corrected. Fred had been ready to walk out. Martha had taken him aside near the lumber rack and told him that being right wasn't always worth the damage caused by proving it. At the time, she had believed she was protecting the shop. "I shouldn't have," she said. Fred waited, unsure whether she meant now or all those years ago. Martha took out her phone and photographed the numbers. "We need the receipt." Alan kept business records in a small office at the front of the workshop. The room had 1 desk, 2 filing cabinets, and a calendar still turned to the month he entered the hospital. Sean had stacked cartons along the wall without labels. Some were open, papers leaned out at angles. Fred stopped in the doorway. He'd haunt us for this. He'd have to get in line. The first filing cabinet held tax records, supplier bills, and warranty booklets. The second was locked. Martha tried the office key, the desk key, and 2 small brass keys from Alan's old ring. None worked. "Sean have it?" Fred asked. "He took a box of keys after the funeral." "Did he ask?" "He said he needed them for the estate." Fred crouched and studied the lock. "I can open it without hurting anything." "Then do it. Is you sure?" "It's my building, Fred." He nodded once. That answer seemed to please him. From his toolbox, he selected two thin pieces of metal. The lock gave way in less than a minute. Martha opened the top drawer. Inside were folders arranged by year. Her labels ran along the tabs in blue ink. She had organized Alan's records every January. She had typed invoices at the kitchen table, called customers when deliveries ran late, and tracked deposits in a green ledger. When the children were grown and Alan's orders became more complicated, she spent 3 days each week repairing finishes in the back room. Still, every check had been made out to Perry Cabinet Making. Every tax form named Alan as the owner. If a customer complimented a repaired chair, Alan would say, "Martha handled that one." But if someone asked about the business, they called it his shop. Martha had accepted that arrangement because the money came into their household. She hadn't wanted a separate title or paycheck. Asking for either had seemed petty when they were married and working toward the same bills. Now the equipment belonged to Sean and Lauren, and her own work existed mostly in handwriting nobody would notice. Fred pulled a folder from the second row. 2009. They found the receipt after 20 minutes. The vise had been ordered with shop supplies, but a handwritten note showed that Fred reimbursed Alan in full. The check number was listed beside it. Fred smiled. "There you are." Martha made copies on the office printer. The machine groaned through each page, leaving a gray stripe down one side, but the words remained clear. She handed Fred a copy and put another in an envelope for the auctioneer. "You could take the vise now," she said. "No, if I carry it out before they inventory, Sean will say I stole it. He knows you. That isn't the same as trusting me when money's involved." Martha didn't argue. She returned the vise to the bench and tied a note to its handle stating that ownership was disputed. Beneath that, she wrote the receipt and check numbers. They moved to the customer pieces. 2 dining chairs stood near the finishing room. A side table waited beneath a cloth, its top removed after a glue joint failed. Each piece had a paperwork order in Martha's handwriting. Fred placed them near the rear door. "What about the walnut chest?" he asked. "That belongs to the shop. Alan bought it damaged. You repaired half of it. Half doesn't make it mine." "No, but it ought to count for something." Martha lifted the cloth covering the chest. One corner had been crushed during a move. She had replaced the missing veneer and matched the color, but the drawers still needed work. "I thought the children might let me finish these," she said. "Did you ask?" "I asked to run the shop. That isn't what I asked." Martha smoothed the cloth again. She had not asked for individual tools or unfinished work. She had offered a lease plan that required Sean and Lauren to keep everything together. Somewhere in her mind, that had felt important. If they agreed, they would be admitting she belonged in the workshop. They would be choosing her judgment over quick money. Fred understood before she said it. "You don't need them to tell you that you worked here," he said. "I need equipment if I'm going to keep working." "That's different. It doesn't feel different." They stood quietly beside the chest. Rainwater moved through the damaged gutter outside, spilling in a steady sheet. Fred took the clipboard from the bench. "Then we write down what you did. Every customer piece. Every repair that's yours. We start there." By noon, they had filled 7 pages. Fred knew the machines and larger tools. Martha knew the small things. She identified a set of carving gouges that belonged to a retired employee, a portable sander Alan had borrowed, and 4 mahogany boards a customer had supplied for a table extension. At the sharpening station, Fred found an empty space beneath a shelf. "Where's the small grinder?" Martha checked the list. "Not here. Alan had 2. Sean took 1 last summer. Was it part of his inheritance? All the shop equipment was." "That's not what I asked." Martha set down the clipboard. Sean had taken the grinder after telling her he needed to sharpen flooring blades. He had promised to return it the following week. Martha hadn't mentioned it to Lauren or written it down. She added the grinder to the inventory and noted the date Sean removed it. Fred watched her. "Anything else?" "A compressor, 2 extension cords, the moisture meter. Write them." "He didn't steal them. I didn't say he did. He borrowed them. Then there's no harm in writing where they went." Martha wrote each item carefully. The list made her uneasy because it turned family habits into facts. Sean had always been comfortable taking things from the workshop. He returned some. Others stayed in his truck or warehouse until Alan asked for them. Martha usually prevented that question. She would remind Sean, retrieve the tool herself, or tell Alan it had been returned when it was still on the way. She had thought she was keeping peace between 2 stubborn men. In truth, she had taught Sean that taking first would cost him nothing. At 1, Fred left to call his bank about the old check. Martha stayed in the office with the inventory. Her hands were stiff, and the joints at the base of both thumbs burned. She held them under warm water in the small utility sink until the pain eased. Her phone rang while she was drying them. Lauren's name appeared on the screen. "Are you at the shop?" Lauren asked. "Yes." Sean said Fred's there. He was. "What are you two doing?" "Documenting what belongs to other people." Lauren exhaled. This is exactly what Sean was worried about. What was he worried about? That things would disappear before the auction. Martha looked through the office window at rows of tagged and untagged tools. "Nothing has disappeared," she said. "I found several things that already had." "What does that mean?" "It means Sean has equipment at his warehouse. He borrowed that." "Yes." "Then why are you making it sound suspicious?" "I wrote down where it is, that's all." Lauren became quiet. She disliked conflict, but she disliked uncertainty more. If Sean had removed part of their shared inheritance without telling her, the auction no longer offered the clean ending she expected. "What did he take?" she asked. Martha read the list. "The compressor too?" "Yes. He told me Dad gave him that. Alan was already sick. I was in the room when Sean asked. Alan said he could use it for a job." Lauren's voice changed. "I'll call him." "You don't have to do that for me. I'm not doing it for you." The words landed harder than Lauren intended. Martha knew this because Lauren immediately tried to repair them. "I mean, it's half mine too." "I understand." "Mom." "What?" "Don't say it that way." "What way?" "Like you're keeping score." Martha looked at her 7 pages of inventory. "I've spent most of my life making sure nobody kept score," she said. Lauren had no answer. After a few seconds, she said the auctioneer would arrive at 9 the next morning. Martha worked until the light outside faded. Before locking up, she took the customer pieces into the house. She cleared space in the dining room and laid an old quilt beneath the chairs. The side table went against the wall near the china cabinet. The furniture crowded the room, but it was safe. The next morning, Sean arrived before the auctioneer. He entered through the workshop side door without knocking and placed the missing moisture meter on the bench. He did not mention the compressor or grinder. Martha stood in the office doorway. "Good morning." Sean looked at the clipboard in her hand. "Lauren called me. I assumed she would." "You could have called me yourself." "I did when you borrowed those things. That was months ago." "Yes." He picked up the moisture meter, then put it down again. "The compressor's on a job site. I'll get it back before Saturday. And the rest?" "The grinder's at my warehouse. I don't know about the cords." "Then say that when the auctioneer asks." His jaw tightened. "You're making me look dishonest." "No, I'm making the list accurate." Fred arrived with a bank statement confirming his check. The auctioneer came 10 minutes later, carrying tags, forms, and a small camera. He listened to Fred's explanation, compared the receipt with the bank record, and removed the vise from the auction inventory. Then he walked to the wall cabinet. Sean began to speak, but Martha handed over a copy of the relevant page from Alan's probated will. It named the cabinet as her personal bequest. Nothing more was discussed. The auctioneer read the page, checked the bolts, and attached a bright orange card to the handle. "Not included in sale." For the first time since Sean had brought the papers to her kitchen, Martha held written recognition that nobody at the auction could politely misunderstand. The card did not save the workshop. It did not repair the roof or replace the income she was losing. But when Sean reached toward it, the auctioneer said, "That stays." Sean lowered his hand. Martha said nothing. She simply opened her inventory and asked him where Alan's second extension cord had gone. Sean looked toward the lumber rack, as if the cord might be hanging there. "I used it at the warehouse," he said. "I'll bring it with the compressor, before Saturday." "Yes." The auctioneer wrote both items on a separate page. He had no interest in the family discussion. He needed an accurate sale list, clear photographs, and room for buyers to walk without tripping. For the next 3 hours, Martha followed him through the workshop. He tagged the walnut chest. He tagged the workbench and clamps. At the lumber rack, he grouped the boards into one lot and photographed them from both ends. Martha checked her inventory. 4 of those mahogany boards belonged to a customer. Sean looked up. "They've been here for years. They still belong to him." "How do you know which 4? Martha pulled the work order from her folder. Alan had written the board lengths along the bottom. Martha had added a note about a stain sample and drawn a small triangle beside each customer-supplied board. She walked to the rack and found the matching triangles in blue pencil. The auctioneer removed the tag. Sean watched him slide the 4 boards aside. "What's the customer doing with them?" "That isn't our decision," Martha said. She called the number on the work order. The customer answered cautiously, then became surprised when she explained where his lumber had been. "I figured Alan used it," he said. "He didn't. Must be 10 years since I brought that over." 9. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Martha." "About Alan, I mean. I heard, but I never called." "Thank you." He said his brother would collect the boards the following afternoon. Martha wrote the arrangement on the work order and taped a copy to the wood. That one call changed the rest of the day. They found a box of brass fittings supplied for a desk Alan never built. A folding table belonged to a neighborhood church. 2 long clamps had Fred's initials burned into the handles, though Fred said those were gifts to the shop and should stay in the sale. By late afternoon, the auctioneer had removed 3 tags and divided 2 lots. Sean leaned against the bench, tired and irritated. "How much more of this is there?" "I don't know yet," Martha said. "That's a problem." "Yes, it is." He heard the answer beneath the answer. The auction had been arranged from photographs and a quick walkthrough. Nobody had checked Alan's records until Martha opened the locked cabinet. Sean picked up his car keys. "I'll be back tomorrow. The electrician is coming in the morning." "For what?" "The house and workshop." "Why now?" "Because the lights are failing and the heater doesn't work. You can do that after the auction." "I could have done it last year." He had no useful response, so he left. Fred remained behind. He helped Martha move the customer-owned fittings into the office and lock the door. Then he carried his vise to the house. "You want this in the dining room too?" he asked. "No." "The hall closet," he smiled. "Wouldn't want your house looking like a workshop." "It already does." The 2 dining chairs stood near the table. The side table blocked part of the china cabinet, and 4 mahogany boards lay across sawhorses by the back door waiting for collection. Martha found she didn't mind. The electrician arrived Wednesday morning with a canvas bag and a device that beeped when he held it near a live wire. He started in the house, tested the dead upstairs outlets, then followed the circuit down to the basement panel. Martha stayed with him. Sean had once told her that contractors charge more when customers watched. Alan had said contractors made fewer assumptions when customers understood the work. The electrician removed the panel cover and showed her darkened insulation around one wire. "That circuit has been overheating." "How bad?" "Bad enough that I'm turning it off." "Does it feed anything else?" "The upstairs bedrooms, part of the covered walkway, and those lights in the workshop's finishing room." He checked the grounding and found 2 more concerns. None required the house to be abandoned, but he told Martha not to use the affected outlets or the finishing room circuit until repairs were made. He wrote everything plainly on his inspection report. The roof inspector came after lunch. He climbed into the attic, then walked the roof in light rain. The water over the upstairs ceiling wasn't coming through directly above the stain. It entered near a cracked flashing, traveled along a rafter, and dropped several feet away. He found soft wood near the rear gutter and worn shingles along the workshop side. "You can patch the flashing," he told Martha, "but that won't solve the rest." "How long do I have?" He looked toward the clouds. "That depends on the weather. I wouldn't plan on another winter." Martha paid both inspection fees from her savings. At the kitchen table, she added the reports to the blue folder and crossed out the lower figures from her earlier estimates. The larger figures remained. Fred arrived after 3 with the penetrating oil. They walked back to the workshop, where the electrician's red tape covered the finishing room switch. Martha opened both cabinet doors and removed everything from the lower shelves. Most of it went into shallow boxes. She labeled each box with its contents, even though Sean had told her nobody wanted them. Fred sprayed the base bolts until oil ran in thin brown lines across the concrete. He treated the bolts through the back rail too. "We let that sit," he said. "For how long?" "Overnight, if we're patient. And if we're not." "We damaged the bolt heads today instead of tomorrow." They worked on the cabinet contents while the oil settled. Martha found ordinary things. Sandpaper folded around cork blocks, loose screws, a coffee can full of wooden drawer stops. 2 bent cabinet scrapers Alan had meant to sharpen. In the upper right corner stood 7 molding planes. Their dark wooden bodies were dusty, and the cutting irons showed small blooms of rust. Fred lifted one. "Should these be in the auction?" Martha asked. He examined the maker's stamp. "They're old, but not especially rare. Alan used to pick them up at estate sales. They're inside my cabinet. Then they're yours. The statement was simple. Martha placed the planes into her own box. Behind them, the shelf ended against a plain wooden back. She ran her hand over it. The cabinet was shallower inside than it appeared from the side, but the difference could be explained by the heavy frame and wall bolts. Did Alan build this? She asked. Parts of it. The doors came from an older storage case. When did he bolt it down? Fred looked beneath the cabinet again. It wasn't bolted when I started here. I remember it in the old shop. So do I. We moved it into this building on dollies. Martha thought about the years that followed. The cabinet had always stood against the rear wall, though she couldn't remember when the floor bolts appeared. Fred wiped oil from one bolt with a rag. He moved it when he repaired this wall. When was that? About 10 years ago. There was damp coming through behind the siding. He closed off this end of the shop. For how long? A week, maybe longer. You helped him? He didn't want help. That was unusual. Alan accepted help with any job that required lifting. Pride had never made him foolish about his back. What did he say he was doing? Replacing wet studs and adding insulation. Martha studied the painted wall around the cabinet. The boards to the left showed old nail holes and layers of cream paint. Directly behind the cabinet, a narrow strip of visible wall was smoother and slightly grayer. You never saw it open? No. He had plastic sheeting across here. Told us to use the front benches. Who's us? Me and the two men working here then. Fred's face tightened as he searched his memory. He came in early that whole week. By the time we arrived, he was already working behind the plastic. Did he move the cabinet alone? I suppose he did. Martha looked at its length and weight. No, he didn't. Fred put the plane back in its box. Maybe he used the engine hoist. Then why wouldn't he let you help? I don't know. It was not an answer, but it was the first thing about the cabinet that did not fit ordinary shop practice. They waited another hour. Then Fred fitted a socket over the first floor bolt. He leaned on the breaker bar. Nothing turned. Martha held the socket steady. Fred tried again, using slow pressure instead of force. The bar flexed slightly, but the bolt remained fixed. Try the other one, she said. The second floor bolt would not move either. The back bolts were worse. Paint and rust filled the edges of the heads. Martha cleaned one with a wire brush until pain traveled from her thumb into her wrist. Fred took the brush from her. That's enough. I'm not finished. Your hand is. She opened and closed her fingers. The joint at the base of her thumb had swollen. I can still hold the flashlight. You can also make coffee. I made coffee for men in this shop for 30 years. It never loosened a bolt. No, but it kept Alan from firing half of us. Martha rested her hand against her coat. There it was again, the role everyone remembered. She had made coffee, settled arguments, called customers, and corrected invoices after midnight. She had restored damaged finishes and taught new workers how to match old shellac. But the family description remained simpler. Alan built furniture. Martha helped. She had allowed that description because it made Alan proud and kept the business easy to explain. Now she had to produce records to prove she could identify her own work. Tomorrow, she said, you're going to show me how to cut these bolts. Fred looked at the cabinet. Cutting them may scar the base. Then show me how to avoid that. What's changed? Martha glanced at the smoother wall and the cabinet's deep side frame. Alan went to trouble to put it here. I'm not letting anybody break it because they're in a hurry. Fred packed the breaker bar away. We'll need a reciprocating saw, metal blades, wedges, and at least 2 more people when it moves. Not Sean. I wasn't going to suggest him. They sprayed the bolts again before leaving. On Thursday, the customer's brother collected the mahogany boards and signed the inventory. The church sent 2 men for its folding table. Fred obtained a second bank record for the vise and gave the original to Martha for safekeeping. Each recovered item made the list shorter and the obligation clearer. Martha wasn't only protecting her cabinet. She had become responsible for making sure the auction sold nothing that belonged elsewhere. She spent Thursday evening comparing every work order with every untagged object. At nearly midnight, she found a receipt for an antique mirror frame stored above the finishing room. The circuit there was off. The room had no safe light. On Friday morning, Martha returned with Fred and 2 battery lanterns. They placed the lights on the floor and climbed the storage steps one at a time. The mirror frame lay beneath a canvas sheet, almost invisible from below. Fred held the ladder while Martha examined the paper label tied to it. "This belongs to the same customer as the brass fittings," she said. "Can you reach it?" "Yes." "Can you lift it?" "No." It cost her something to say that. Fred did not make the cost larger by pretending not to hear. He climbed after she came down. Together, using a rope and padded straps, they lowered the frame without touching the darkened wiring. The auctioneer arrived while they were carrying it into the office. He compared the customer number with Martha's work order and removed one final tag from the sale. "That everything?" he asked. Martha looked at the completed inventory. "Everything that doesn't belong to Sean and Lauren. And the cabinet stays where it is until I can move it safely." The auctioneer glanced at the rusted bolts. "Buyer won't want that problem anyway." Martha closed the cabinet doors and retied her cardboard name tag above the orange card. She no longer wanted the children to leave her enough equipment to prove she still belonged in Alan's shop. By Friday afternoon, she wanted every rightful object accounted for. The sale finished cleanly, and the cabinet removed without losing whatever intention had made Alan bolt it to a repaired wall. The inspections had shown her how much the house needed. The inventory had shown her how little protection good intentions provided. On Saturday, she would watch the business leave. After that, she had 21 days to work out what could remain. The first buyers arrived before 8, carrying tape measures and travel mugs. They spoke quietly at first, as people do when entering a place that still feels connected to someone who died. That caution faded once the auctioneer began calling numbers. Martha stood near the office with her inventory. Fred stayed beside the engraving bench until his vise was safely in the hall closet. Lauren worked at a folding table, recording buyer names and collection times. Sean moved constantly between the auctioneer and the larger equipment. The table saw sold first. A contractor from Ohio started it, listened to the motor, and nodded. 10 minutes later, 2 men were removing the fence and wrapping the power cord around the base. Alan had bought that saw after landing his first hotel renovation. Martha remembered balancing the payment against groceries and the gas bill. Sean remembered making scrapwood boats beside it. Lauren remembered the noise and the way Alan never heard her enter unless she touched his arm. None of those memories affected the price. The jointer went to the same contractor. The drill press went to a man who made custom doors. The long workbench brought less than Sean expected because one buyer noticed a split near the rear vise. "That split has been there 20 years, Martha said. The buyer looked at her. "Still a split." He was right. Martha disliked him for about 10 seconds, then wrote down his collection time. By noon, the shop had developed empty spaces. Pale rectangles marked the concrete where machines had stood. Sawdust remained packed around anchor points and beneath cabinets. Each removal exposed some small thing that cleaning had missed. A pencil, a washer, a strip of veneer. One of Alan's cough drops hardened inside its wrapper. Martha placed the pencil in her coat pocket and swept the rest into a dustpan. Sean came over while buyers examined the walnut chest. "Prices are soft," he said. "You're selling everything in one day. That's what an auction is." "Yes. You think I should have taken your lease offer. I think you needed money faster than the equipment could earn it." He looked toward Lauren. "Did she tell you something?" "No." Sean had always assumed information moved through the family with Martha at the center. For years it had. Lauren told her what Sean was doing. Sean asked what Lauren had said. Alan complained to Martha instead of speaking directly to either of them. Martha used to consider that closeness. Now it looked more like unpaid traffic control. "The compressor's outside," Sean said. "Grinder too. I saw them. I brought the cords. I marked them received." He waited for appreciation. Martha gave him accuracy. The walnut chest sold to a furniture dealer who planned to finish the drawers. When the dealer asked who had repaired the damaged veneer, Fred pointed at Martha. She did. The dealer ran his fingers over the corner. "Good match." "Thank you," Martha said. "Do you take work?" Sean turned toward them. Martha took a small notepad from her pocket and wrote her phone number. "I will again, not this month." The dealer folded the paper into his wallet. It was one possible customer, not a business. Even so, Sean's expression changed. For the first time, he seemed to understand that selling Alan's machines did not sell Martha's hands. By mid-afternoon, the movable lots had been called. Buyers began loading lumber, hardware cabinets, benches, and boxed tools. The contractor from Ohio had bought the bulk group along the rear wall. He checked each number against his sheet as his crew moved down the line. When he reached Martha's cabinet, he found no number. The refusal that followed drew Sean, the auctioneer, and several tired onlookers into the same cold corner. Martha did not repeat herself or explain the will again. The orange card hung in plain sight. The buyer would not move a cabinet fixed to the building. The auctioneer would not add an unlisted item after the lots had closed. Sean could demand both, but demand was not ownership. At last, the auctioneer drew a line beneath the final entry. "The sale is closed," he said. That settled the smaller question. The machines could leave. The inventory could leave. The cabinet could not. Sean walked outside before the last buyers finished loading. Lauren remained at the folding table, pressing carbon copies into envelopes. Martha watched the contractor's truck pull away, with the table saw strapped upright behind the cab. The workshop doors stood open, and cold air moved through the stripped room. Fred came beside her. "You all right?" "No." "Want the doors shut?" "Not yet." The emptiness needed to be seen. If she shut the doors too quickly, she knew she would spend the evening imagining the machines still in their places. Lauren carried the folding table toward the side door. "Sean says we'll be back tomorrow for anything that didn't sell. Call first. It's our property. It's my building." Lauren stopped. Martha kept her voice even. "You can collect what belongs to you. You call before entering. We have keys. You have keys I allowed you to keep." Lauren rested the table against her hip. "Are you changing the locks?" "If I need to. That seems extreme. So did auctioning the shop from under me." Lauren's face closed. Martha had gone further than she meant to, but she did not pull the words back. After a moment, Lauren said, "We'll call." That night, Martha locked the house, the workshop, and the walkway door between them. She put Alan's old key ring in her bedside drawer. On Sunday, Sean sent a text before arriving. He and Lauren removed the unsold boxes and a stack of low-grade lumber. They left broken shelving, sawdust bags, and several containers of dried finish. Sean pointed to the remains. 21 days? For what? To clear all this. The trash is yours. The cabinet is yours. The empty finish cans came from your inventory. Lauren stepped between them without physically standing between them. It was a habit she had learned from Martha. "We'll take the cans," she said. "Can we just leave the shelving?" Martha looked at the bent metal uprights. "Leave it." Sean carried the cans outside without speaking. By noon, the only substantial object against the rear wall was the cabinet. Martha's name still hung from the cord handle. The orange auction card hung beneath it. Fred returned Monday with a reciprocating saw, a box of metal blades, wooden wedges, and a low hydraulic cart borrowed from a repair garage. He had also brought 2 lifting straps. "We empty it first," he said. They removed the molding planes, sanding blocks, jars, and small hardware. Martha numbered the boxes and carried them into the office. Fred took off the doors to reduce the weight. The cabinet looked different without them. Its thick side frames extended several inches beyond the interior shelves. Fred measured the outside depth, then the inside depth. "Nearly 5 inches missing," he said. "Frame and back, could be." He did not sound convinced. They positioned the hydraulic cart in front and ran a strap around the cabinet. Fred tightened it until the cabinet leaned gently toward the padded cart. "If it shifts, we let the strap catch it," he said. "Don't put your hand behind anything." "I know. I'm saying it because Alan isn't here to say it twice." The first saw blade dulled against the floor bolt without cutting through. Fred changed the angle. The second blade bit into the metal, filling the shop with a harsh vibration. Martha held the work light and watched the narrow gap. The sound traveled through her teeth. When the first bolt separated, the cabinet settled less than an inch against the strap. The second took longer. Fred stopped twice to cool the blade. Martha's hands ached from gripping the light, but she kept it steady. They moved to the back bolts. Those were harder to reach. One had been driven through a steel plate hidden behind the cabinet rail. Alan didn't want this walking away, Fred said. Apparently not. By late afternoon, 3 bolts had been cut. The 4th remained tight near the lower corner. Fred lay on the concrete and worked the saw into the gap. The blade snapped. He switched off the tool. "You hurt?" Martha asked. "No." She helped him sit up. His face had gone pale from the strain. "We stop," she said. 1 bolt left. "We stop." Fred wanted to argue. Then he looked at her swollen thumb and didn't. They returned Tuesday morning with fresh blades. Before cutting, Fred added a second strap and moved the hydraulic cart closer. Martha placed wedges beneath the front edge. The final bolt gave way suddenly. The cabinet tipped forward. The first strap caught, but the wooden wedges shot across the floor. Martha stepped back as Fred lowered the hydraulic cart. Together, they eased the cabinet away from the wall until it rested at an angle. Behind it was not the smooth gray wall they expected. A rectangle of unpainted boards filled the space between two wall studs. Thin strips of wood sealed its edges. The rectangle was nearly as long as the cabinet and about 4 inches deep. Fred switched off the work light, then turned it on again, as if different light might make the construction ordinary. "That wasn't for damp," he said. Martha touched one ceiling strip. "No." They did not open it immediately. Martha photographed the wall, the cut bolts, the cabinet, and the wooden panel. Then she retrieved the will folder from the house. She read the page naming the cabinet, but the legal wording felt less simple now. It referred to the wall cabinet and property secured with it. She could not tell whether that meant shelves and hardware, or whatever Alan had sealed behind the wall. "Should we call Sean and Lauren?" Fred asked. "Not until we know whether there's anything to call about." Using a narrow chisel, Martha lifted the first strip without breaking it. Fred removed the others. The panel came forward in one piece. A shallow wooden bay appeared behind it. At the front rested one package wrapped in oilcloth. Behind the package stood a fitted rack covered by another protective board. No tools were visible. Nothing suggested money, and there was no second opening. Alan had used the available space with careful precision. Martha lifted the oilcloth packet onto the workbench. Inside was a handwritten index, several pages long. Each line carried letters, numbers, dates, and short descriptions. Alan's writing became smaller near the margins, where he had added purchase sources and marks. A folded note lay on top. Martha recognized the paper from the pads he kept in the office. She recognized the pressure of his pen before she read the words. "Martha," it began. "Preserve the Pennsylvania set. Keep the index with it." There were further instructions about matching marks before anything was separated, then Alan's initials. Fred read over her shoulder. "What set?" "I don't know." His eyes moved toward the covered rack. Martha picked up the first index page again. Alan had begun the entries years before he rebuilt the wall. This was not something he gathered at the end of his life and hid in fear. He had documented it patiently, then built a place for it. Her phone rang on the stripped workbench. Sean had received the auction company's final statement. He wanted Martha to check whether one unsold box remained in the office. She looked at the open bay, the oilcloth, and Alan's note. "I'll call you back," she said. After ending the call, she did not remove the deeper board. Instead, she photographed every page in order, placed the note back on top, and locked the packet in the office filing cabinet. Whatever Alan had preserved now required more than curiosity. It required Martha to decide who had a right to know before anyone else decided for her. She began by calling Lauren. "I need you to come to the workshop," Martha said. "Now, if you can." "What happened?" "We moved the cabinet. There's a sealed storage bay behind it." Lauren was silent long enough for Martha to hear office voices in the background. "What's in it?" "I've opened one packet. There's an index and a note from your father." "What does the note say?" "He wanted me to preserve something he called the Pennsylvania set." "Is that money?" "No." "Do you know what it is?" "No." Lauren lowered her voice. "Did you tell Sean?" "He called while we were opening it. I told him I'd call back. I'll leave work early." "Thank you." Sean arrived first. He came through the side door carrying the unsold box he had asked Martha to find. It had been in the office all along, mislabeled as small hinges when it contained drawer pulls. He set it near the entrance, then noticed the cabinet leaning on the hydraulic cart. "What did you do?" "We cut the bolts." "You cut them?" "They wouldn't turn." He walked behind the cabinet and stopped at the open bay. Fred stood near the workbench, wiping metal filings from the saw. Martha could see him preparing to become a witness instead of a participant. Sean touched the edge of the wall panel. "This was behind there?" "Yes." "What was in it?" Martha unlocked the office filing cabinet and brought out the oilcloth packet. She placed it on the workbench but kept one hand on it. Sean unfolded the note. "What's a Pennsylvania set?" "I don't know." He scanned the index pages. "These are tool measurements, some of them." Dad cataloged everything. He had notebooks full of this stuff. "This was sealed behind my cabinet, behind the cabinet, not in it." Martha looked at him. That distinction became important quickly. "I'm asking." "No, you're beginning an argument before we know what we found." Sean laid down the note. It's probably another box of obsolete tools. Then waiting won't hurt you. Waiting for what? Lauren. Then we'll decide how to open the rest without damaging it. He looked toward the covered rack. You already opened it. I opened the front panel. I haven't removed the rack. It's in my father's workshop. It's in my wall, behind my cabinet, in my building, and Dad put it there. Yes. That stopped them both. Alan had created the uncertainty. Whatever he intended, he had made no ordinary choice when he sealed the bay and bolted Martha's bequest in front of it. Lauren arrived 40 minutes later. She had changed from her office shoes into sneakers, but still wore work trousers and a long cardigan. Sean met her in the covered walkway and spoke before she entered. Martha could not hear every word. She heard property, estate, and don't touch anything else. Lauren stepped inside and looked at the cabinet. I remember that being against the wall, she said. So did I, Martha replied. Dad never said there was something behind it. He didn't tell me either. Martha showed her the note and index. Lauren read more slowly than Sean had. On the second page, she traced one line with her finger. These dates go back a long way. Yes. What are the letters? We haven't matched them yet. Sean leaned against the bench. We need to call the estate lawyer. The estate was settled, Martha said. This wasn't disclosed. None of us knew it existed. Exactly. Lauren refolded the note along its original crease. The cabinet belongs to Mom. The wall doesn't. The wall belongs to her, too. That's not what I mean. Martha took the note from Lauren and returned it to the packet. No one is taking anything today, she said. Fred and I will photograph the rack where it stands. Then we'll remove it according to Alan's index. Sean pushed away from the bench. Why you and Fred? Because we found it, and because we know how to handle old tools. I can handle tools. You sold them. His face reddened. Lauren looked at Martha. That wasn't necessary. It was accurate. Accuracy isn't always kind. Martha recognized her own old lesson coming back in Lauren's voice. Being right wasn't worth the damage caused by proving it. She had used that idea to keep peace so often that her daughter now treated peace as an obligation Martha owed everyone else. I'll keep records, Martha said. You'll both receive copies. If either of you wants to watch, come tomorrow at 9. Sean picked up the box of drawer pulls. Nothing leaves the building. Nothing has. He left without saying whether he would return. Lauren stayed. She examined the empty shop, the pale floor marks, and the damaged shelving they had left behind. I didn't think it would look this bad, she said. How did you think it would look? Clear. It is clear. No. It looks taken apart. Martha wanted to say that taken apart was what clear meant when the room had held someone's life. She did not. Lauren ran her hand along the cabinet's scarred side. Are you still planning to move this out? I'm planning to put it back when the wall is safe. Why? Because it's mine. That's not a reason to keep something this heavy. It is today. Lauren withdrew her hand. Sean thinks you're trying to stop the estate from closing. The estate closed months ago. You know what he means. Yes, he means his money. Lauren flinched. Martha softened her voice. How bad are his debts? I don't know. You know more than I do. He asked if I could advance him part of my share before the auction funds clear. Did you? No. Lauren looked toward the door Sean had used. He said he has payroll due. Martha knew what Sean wanted that fact to do. Payroll sounded honorable. It placed workers behind his urgency and made questions feel selfish. He has a business account, she said. He says 2 customers are late paying. Then he needs to speak to his bank. You used to help him, with small amounts. Some weren't small. Martha folded the oilcloth around Alan's papers. The money she had given Sean over the years had come from household savings. Alan complained, then agreed. Sean repaid portions, missed months, and eventually resumed talking as though repayment had been completed. Martha rarely corrected him in front of Lauren. She didn't want one child measuring what the other received. That silence had not protected their relationship. It had hidden its shape. I can't finance him now, she said. I didn't ask you to. No. You wanted me to remember why he's frightened. Lauren looked down. Maybe. I remember. The following morning, Sean did not come. Lauren sent a message saying she could not leave work again, but wanted photographs. Fred set 2 padded sawhorses beside the open bay. Martha placed her phone on a small tripod and began a video. She stated the date, the location, and what had already been removed. She held each index page before the camera. Then Fred unscrewed the protective board covering the fitted rack. 32 wooden planes stood in 2 horizontal rows. They were not like the worn planes from the cabinet shelf. These had long bodies shaped for cutting decorative profiles into molding. Some were dark brown, almost black with age. Others had pale beech bodies marked by handling. Each carried a maker's stamp at one end. Small paper labels tied to the planes matched Alan's index codes. Martha read the first code aloud. Fred found the same code on the top row. They lifted the plane together and placed it on a padded sawhorse. The index described its profile, maker, purchase source, and identifying damage. A small chip on the heel matched Alan's note exactly. 1, Martha said. They worked from left to right. Behind the planes were pattern books, folded receipts, and a narrow ledger wrapped in clean cotton. The ledger recorded each purchase in sequence. Some entries included names of dealers. Others listed estate sales, tool exchanges, and private purchases. Alan had noted every maker's stamp, repair, and transfer he could verify. The first entry was dated 1998. The final entries appeared shortly before he became ill. By early afternoon, all 32 planes stood on the padded supports in index order. No number was missing. Every label matched an entry. That was the useful result Martha had needed. The set was not a random group of tools. Alan had built it deliberately and kept its history with it. Fred opened one pattern book. Hand-drawn molding profiles filled the pages, each with dimensions and short notes about the Pennsylvania shop or town where the pattern had been used. Alan never showed me this, he said. Would you have known what it was? I would have known it mattered to him. Martha looked at the complete row. That's not the same as knowing what it is. She began with the maker's names. Using the office computer, she searched the first stamp. The results were scattered. An auction listing showed one similar plane. A collector's article mentioned a Pennsylvania maker whose surviving tools were difficult to identify. A museum catalog described regional molding planes as records of local building styles. None gave Martha a reliable value. She searched the second stamp, then the third. Several names appeared in institutional collections. One matched a plane shown in an old exhibition photograph. Fred pulled his chair closer. Call the museum. And say what? Say what we have. We don't know what we have. That's why you call. Martha found the museum's collections number. The receptionist transferred her twice before a woman answered. This is Kathleen Washington. Martha explained that her husband had preserved a set of signed Pennsylvania molding planes with receipts, pattern books, and an indexed ledger. Kathleen's first questions were practical. Have you cleaned them? No. Applied oil? No. Separated the labels? No. Good. How many planes? 32. The silence on the line changed. Are the maker stamps readable? Most appear to be. And the purchase records stay with the individual index entries? Yes. Kathleen asked Martha to send photographs of the full group, 6 stamps, the first and last ledger pages, and the exterior of the concealed storage bay. She gave a direct email address. Martha sent the files while Kathleen remained on the phone. A few minutes later, Kathleen said, Mrs. Perry, I can't evaluate authenticity from photographs. I can tell you this group should remain intact. Please don't sell or distribute individual pieces. Is it valuable? It may be institutionally important. Those are not always the same thing. Can you come here? Kathleen asked for the address. When Martha said Perry Road, Kathleen paused again. I can visit Friday morning. After the call, Martha forwarded the email exchange and photographs to Lauren and Sean. She did it before she could talk herself into waiting. Lauren replied first. Please don't make any decisions until we talk. Sean called less than a minute later. Martha answered. You contacted a museum? He asked. Yes. Without telling us? I sent you everything. After you contacted them. Would you have told me not to? He did not answer directly. What did they say it's worth? They didn't. Then why are they coming? To determine whether it matters. Sean's breathing slowed. He was no longer dismissing the objects. Martha could hear him recalculating around them. Nothing happens Friday unless Lauren and I are there, he said. The appointment is with me. This is family property. That hasn't been established. Then don't pretend it's yours. Martha looked across the empty workshop at the 32 planes Alan had hidden behind the cabinet he'd left her. I'm not pretending anything, she said. I'm finding out what he preserved. Sean ended the call without saying goodbye. Martha locked the planes, records, and pattern books in the office. Then she moved the filing cabinet key from Alan's old ring onto her own. The new key was still in her coat pocket when rain began tapping the workshop roof. By midnight, the tapping had become a steady roar. Martha woke to water striking the dishpan upstairs. A second leak had appeared near the covered walkway, directly above the door leading to the shop. She moved a bucket beneath it and called the roofing company's emergency number. The roofer arrived Thursday morning and climbed into the attic again. Wind had lifted several worn shingles near the flashing. He could make a temporary repair, but the wet section of roof deck had spread farther than his inspection suggested. Martha approved the patch. He covered part of the roof with a dark tarp and secured it with boards. The work stopped the leak, but the invoice took another piece from her savings. It bought time, not a roof. After he left, Martha stood in the dining room with the paper in her hand. The customer chairs crowded one side. Fred's vise occupied the hall closet. Alan's planes and records were locked in the workshop office. Every room seemed to hold a duty that had arrived before she could pay for the last one. She opened the blue folder and added the invoice. When she tried to close the metal fastener, pain caught at the base of her thumb. The joint had swollen enough that she could not press it flat. Fred noticed the brace when he arrived that afternoon. "You bought that yourself? At the pharmacy? You have a doctor?" "I have a brace. That's not what I asked." "I know." They prepared for Kathleen's visit without moving the collection more than necessary. Fred carried the planes from the office to the padded supports. Martha matched each label against the index and handled the papers with her left hand. The brace made her clumsy. She dropped one receipt, then bent too quickly to catch it. Her lower back tightened as she stood. Fred picked up the paper. "We can cancel," he said. "No. She'll come another day. The roof won't wait another day. Neither will Sean. You don't have to prove you can hurt in several places at once." Martha sat in the office chair. The empty workshop had made every sound sharper. Rain struck the tarp. The heater clicked without starting. Fred's boots dragged lightly over concrete as he moved the next padded support. "I thought if I kept the shop," Martha said, "I could earn enough to fix the house. You still might. With what machines? Repair work doesn't need every machine Alan owned. It needs heat, safe wiring, a dry roof." Fred sat across from her, and hands. Martha looked at the brace. She could repair furniture with arthritis. She had done it for years. She could adjust her grip, use lighter scrapers, work in shorter periods, and ask for help with lifting. But she could not pretend the work would simply continue as before. That pretense had been part of her lease proposal. She had offered 6 months as if effort alone could hold off the roof, the furnace, her hands, and Sean's debts. "What if Kathleen says the planes matter?" Fred asked. "Then we preserve them." "That could mean selling them." Martha glanced toward the oilcloth packet. Alan didn't write sell. He didn't write keep. No. The difference sat between them for the rest of the afternoon. Kathleen Washington arrived Friday at 9, carrying a hard-sided document case and 2 pairs of clean cotton gloves. She was 51, composed without being stiff, and dressed for the cold in dark trousers and a wool coat. Sean and Lauren arrived 6 minutes later. Sean had not asked permission. Lauren had sent a message from the driveway. Kathleen greeted them politely, then turned back to Martha. "You're Mrs. Perry?" "Martha? And you're the owner of the property?" "Yes." "May I see where the group was stored before we examine it?" Martha led her to the open wall bay. She showed the cut bolts, the cabinet on the hydraulic cart, and the fitted rack. Kathleen photographed the bay from several angles, then measured its depth. Was the space climate controlled? The workshop was heated when Alan was working. Any known flooding? Not in this wall. He repaired damp framing before he built the bay. Kathleen examined the unpainted boards and the ceiling strips. The storage was careful, though not archival. He was protecting the group from handling more than from humidity. Sean stepped closer. "Does that hurt the value?" Kathleen looked at him. "I haven't discussed value. I'm asking generally. Condition affects everything generally." She returned her attention to Martha. "May I see the index?" Martha unlocked the office and brought out the oilcloth packet. She unfolded it on a clean pad. Kathleen read Alan's note first, then moved through the index pages without speaking. Lauren stood near the door with her arms folded. Sean watched Kathleen's face for any reaction. Kathleen gave him none. At the padded supports, she examined each plane without removing its label. She read the maker's stamps through a magnifying lens and compared the profiles with Alan's pattern books. At the seventh plane, she asked, "Did your husband work with an institutional collection?" "Not that I know of." "Was he a member of a tool collectors association?" "He attended sales. He knew dealers," Fred said. Alan didn't like meetings. Kathleen smiled slightly. Many serious collectors don't. Sean looked toward Martha. The word collector had changed the room for him. Alan's old tools had become a collection because someone from a museum used the word. Kathleen continued. One plane carried a stamp she photographed 4 times under different light. Another had a repair documented in the ledger and visible along the fence. She matched receipt dates with Alan's entries and checked whether the handwriting remained consistent. After nearly 2 hours, she removed her gloves. "I need to be careful about what I say," she told Martha. "I'm not a conservator, and this is not an authentication." "Then what can you say?" "The group appears unusually complete. Several makers are well represented in public collections, but I haven't seen them assembled with working patterns and continuous purchase history like this." Fred looked at the 2 rows. "They stay together?" "If our museum pursued an acquisition, yes. The group's meaning depends on the relationships among the planes, records, and pattern books." Martha heard Alan's instruction differently then. Preserve the set did not mean lock 32 tools in a wall forever. It meant do not break the history into saleable pieces. Sean moved nearer the workbench. "What would a museum pay?" Kathleen closed her document case. "That depends on authentication, condition, title, and approval. You must have a range." "I came at Martha's invitation. I'll discuss the collection with her." The directness embarrassed Sean. He disguised it as irritation. "She's not the only interested party." Kathleen looked at Martha. "Is ownership disputed?" "We're determining that. Then I'll need clear documentation before any formal acquisition." Lauren spoke for the first time. "Could the museum hold it while we sort that out?" "No. We don't accept material into temporary custody under an active family dispute unless there is an immediate preservation risk." "There's a roof leak," Sean said. "Not over this room," Martha replied. Kathleen asked to speak with Martha in the office. Fred remained with the planes. Sean objected with his posture, but not his voice. Inside, Kathleen placed a 2-page letter on the desk. "Our committee chair reviewed the photographs yesterday. I had authority to inspect and, if the group appeared consistent with those photographs, present preliminary terms." Martha read the first page. The museum proposed a conditional purchase of $310,000 for the complete group. That included all 32 planes, Alan's index, the provenance ledger, receipts, labels, and pattern books. The amount was subject to independent authentication, verification of ownership, condition review, and final committee approval. Martha read it again. The temporary roof invoice in her blue folder had felt large that morning. The number on Kathleen's letter changed its size without changing what Martha had paid. "Why so much?" she asked. "Because we would not be purchasing 32 individual tools. We would be purchasing a documented regional record. Your husband appears to have preserved relationships that are often lost when collections are divided. Can you say they're genuine?" "No. That requires a conservator. I can recommend one who has no financial interest in our purchase. And if he disagrees, the offer ends or changes." Martha touched the corner of the letter with her left hand. "What happens to Alan's everyday tools?" "They are not part of this proposal unless they're listed in the set documentation. The planes from the cabinet shelf aren't listed. Then they remain yours." That mattered more than Kathleen could know. Martha did not want every object Alan had touched placed behind museum glass. She wanted the sharpening stones with their uneven surfaces, the worn smoothing plane, and the block plane he kept near the bench. "Would his name stay with the collection?" Martha asked. "The acquisition record would identify him as the collector and document his work. Exhibition decisions are separate, but the provenance remains." Martha looked through the office window. Sean and Lauren stood on opposite sides of the room. Fred stayed between them and the padded supports without making his purpose obvious. "What do you need from me next?" "Proof of title and permission to schedule the conservator. Nothing should be cleaned, repaired, divided, or offered elsewhere in the meantime." Martha signed only the acknowledgement that she had received the conditional letter. She did not accept the sale. When they returned to the workshop, Sean saw the amount before Martha could decide how to tell him. His eyes moved to the figure halfway down the first page. $310,000? Lauren stepped beside him. For those? Conditionally, Kathleen said. Nothing has been authenticated. Sean took the letter from Martha's hand. He read the ownership requirement and looked toward the wall bay. The pressure in his face was no longer about payroll due next week. It had widened into the belief that something valuable from his father's life had been kept from him, even though nobody in the room had known it existed. This has to stop, he said. No conservator until we determine whether this goes back into the estate. Lauren did not agree with him outright, but she nodded toward the letter. We should delay. Kathleen closed her case. That decision belongs to whoever can authorize access. I can authorize access, Martha said. Sean faced her. You don't know that. Martha felt the old pull to settle them, to reduce the amount, soften the question, and make sure both children left, believing she had treated them fairly. For once, treating them fairly could not be her first objective. She took the letter back. I'm scheduling the conservator, she said. You may attend, you may ask questions, you may not remove or separate anything. Sean looked at Lauren. You're hearing this? I'm hearing everyone. No, Martha said. You're waiting for me to make it easier. Lauren's face tightened, but Martha continued. I wanted enough work to keep the house. That isn't the whole problem anymore. Your father left instructions. This set has to remain intact until its history and ownership are clear. Kathleen gave Martha the conservator's card and left. Fred helped return the planes to the locked office. Lauren carried pattern books one at a time, keeping them flat. Sean did not help. Before leaving, he placed his hand on the workshop door. Don't sell anything, he said. Martha turned her own key in the office lock. I won't, she replied, and neither will you. On Monday morning, Martha called the locksmith. She did not ask Sean or Lauren to return their keys. Keys could be copied, misplaced, or remembered differently. She changed the locks on the side door, the covered walkway, and the workshop office. When the locksmith finished, Martha paid him and placed one spare set in the kitchen drawer. Fred received another because he was helping secure the collection. She sent the same message to both children. The locks have been changed. If you need anything from the workshop, call me and arrange a time. The collection remains intact. Gary Webb will inspect it next Thursday at 10. Lauren replied with one word. Okay. Sean called immediately. You locked us out? I changed the locks. That's the same thing. No. You may come when I'm here. I have property in that building. Then tell me what it is and we'll arrange collection. There are unsold supplies. The auction statement says all lots were collected or released. You've been talking to the auctioneer behind my back? I asked for the final record. Sean's voice became quieter. That was when he was most angry. You're treating us like strangers. Strangers call before entering. We're your children. Yes. He waited for her to add something that would cancel the boundary. She did not. What exactly are you planning? He asked. To authenticate the collection, establish who owns it, and decide what protects it. And the museum. I haven't accepted their offer, but you might. If I have the right to make that decision. Sean ended the call. Martha stood in the kitchen with the phone still against her ear. Changing locks had been easy. Hearing her son recognize that she might act without him was harder. She put the phone down and called the electrician. The full rewiring would have to wait. For now, Martha asked him to restore one safe circuit in the workshop. Enough for lights, a small heater, and hand tools. He installed new wiring along the open wall rather than burying it behind plaster. He added 2 outlets near the former finishing area and removed the red tape from one switch. The work cost more than Martha expected. She approved it anyway. By Wednesday afternoon, 3 lights came on without flickering. A portable heater warmed the front half of the room. The back remained cold, but the office and one work area were usable. Fred brought a heavy folding bench from his garage. Martha bought a rubber mat for the concrete floor and set Alan's everyday tools along the rear edge of the bench. The worn smoothing plane fit beneath her right hand as naturally as a kitchen spoon. The repaired circuit did not restore the business. It restored one place where work could happen. Martha carried the 2 customer chairs from the dining room to the workshop. One had a loose rear stretcher. The other needed its finish blended where water had whitened the seat. She had repaired hundreds of similar chairs. With her thumb braced, she changed how she held the scraper and used a clamp instead of relying on grip strength. She worked for 20 minutes, rested for 10, then continued. Fred watched from the office doorway. You're timing me? She asked. I'm timing the heater. You're a poor liar. I worked for Alan. It was a survival skill. He came over and checked the chair joint. You want me to tighten that clamp? No. Want me to ask again in 5 minutes? No. Martha adjusted the pressure herself. The movement hurt, but the joint closed cleanly. She did let Fred carry the chair to the warm side of the room while the glue set. That was new. Asking for help used to feel like surrendering part of the work. Now she treated it as another tool. The next morning, the customer came to collect both chairs. He examined the blended finish near the window, then pressed his hand against the repaired stretcher. Alan used to say this pair wasn't worth fixing, he said. Alan didn't have to sit in them. The man laughed and paid Martha by check. He also brought a small walnut box with a split lid. Can you look at this when your hand's better? I can look at it now. She gave him a written estimate and a collection date. He signed the work order at the folding bench. It was the first paid repair completed in the stripped workshop. The amount would not cover the electrician's invoice. It did not need to. When the customer left, Martha made a copy of the check and placed it in a new folder marked Perry Furniture Repair. Fred read the label. You naming it after yourself or Alan? Myself. Same name, not the same business. He nodded. Fair enough. Martha deposited the check that afternoon. Then she drove downtown to obtain a certified copy of Alan's probated will and the filed estate inventory. She had copies at home, but copies passed around a kitchen table were easy for Sean to call incomplete. The certified pages carried the court seal and filing information. In the clerk's office, Martha compared the estate inventory with the auction record. The equipment and movable business assets appeared exactly where expected. The wall cabinet appeared under her personal bequest, not among the children's property. The words following the cabinet description were broader than the phrase the family had used for 2 years. Martha read them several times. They might cover the bay and everything secured there. They might also invite an argument about where a cabinet ended and a wall began. She did not assume the language would protect her simply because she wanted it to. She paid for 2 certified copies and placed both in a stiff envelope. At home, she made a list of what Gary would need to inspect. Kathleen had said authentication depended on the planes, maker stamps, wear, labels, ledger sequence, receipts, and pattern books. Martha arranged those items in Alan's order. She also created a separate file for ownership. It contained the certified will, probate inventory, photographs of the cabinet before removal, photographs of the bolts, the open bay, and Alan's note. The photographs proved location and condition. They did not decide ownership. Martha kept that distinction clear. On Friday, Kathleen called to confirm Gary's appointment. He'll need a clean table and good light, she said. We have both now. Will all interested family members attend? I invited them. And the collection remains locked? Yes. Has anyone made an alternative offer? No. Kathleen paused. If that changes, please tell me. Our proposal depends on the group remaining intact. Martha looked through the kitchen window toward the workshop. The tarp over the roof lifted slightly in the wind, then settled. If the museum buys it, she asked, how soon would payment happen? After authentication, title review, committee approval, and a signed purchase agreement. If all of that is straightforward, several weeks. My roof may not have several weeks. I understand. I don't want to promise speed we can't provide. Could the museum pay for the building repairs instead and leave the collection here? No. Our acquisition funds can only purchase objects for the museum. Martha had expected that answer. Hearing it still removed an option. What would happen after the purchase? She asked. We would transport the collection, stabilize it, catalog it, and preserve the records with the tools. So preserving it means it leaves. If you sell it to us, yes. After the call, Martha returned to the workshop. She stood before the open wall bay and tried to picture the collection gone. She had once believed victory meant keeping Alan's shop as he left it. The auction had made that impossible. Now keeping the planes simply because Alan had hidden them could leave the roof failing and the workshop unusable. His instruction asked her to preserve the set. It did not ask her to preserve the conditions that had nearly buried it. Martha opened the office and took out the everyday planes from the cabinet shelf. Their worn bodies carried no paper labels. One had Alan's initials cut near the toe. Another had a replacement wedge Fred made from maple. Those were the tools Martha wanted near her bench. The museum set belonged together. Alan's working tools belonged in work. She made a second inventory titled, Items not included in museum proposal. Fred checked it against Alan's index and signed the bottom as a witness. That evening, Martha asked 3 contractors for complete estimates covering the roof, wiring, heating system, workshop insulation, and interior repairs. She did not tell them she had $310,000. She did not have it. She told them she needed honest costs and a practical order of work. The first contractor came Monday. He measured the roof and examined the workshop panel. The second arrived Tuesday and inspected the furnace. The third asked whether Martha wanted the building restored, as storage or as a working shop. A working shop, she said, for you and other people, eventually. That answer surprised Martha after she said it. She had been thinking about Fred's knee, her own hands, and the way Alan's knowledge had nearly disappeared into a sealed wall. One person working alone could not keep a place alive forever. The contractor drew a rough plan on graph paper. It included better lighting, safer outlets, a clean finishing area, and room for 2 additional benches. Martha kept the page. Sean's truck was parked in her driveway when she returned from a pharmacy trip Wednesday afternoon. He stood beside the covered walkway with his hands in his coat pockets. The new key had already failed in the lock. He had come expecting entry and found a boundary instead. Martha carried her pharmacy bag into the kitchen. Sean followed after she unlocked the house door. "I called first," he said. "You left a message while I was driving. I've been waiting 40 minutes. You could have waited somewhere warm." He looked at the contractor folders on the table. "What are those?" "Repair estimates for the house and workshop." "With what money?" Martha put the pharmacy bag beside the sink. "That depends on what Gary finds." Sean pulled out a chair but did not sit. "So you've decided to sell. I've decided to prepare for more than one outcome. You're making plans with money that may belong to us. I'm planning repairs to my property with the collection money. If the collection is mine and I accept the offer." Sean finally sat. He looked tired. The auction proceeds had not relieved him as much as he expected. Expenses had swallowed part of his share before it reached him. "I can make this simpler," he said. "For whom?" "For everybody." He took an envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table. Inside was a typed proposal. He offered Martha $40,000 for the cabinet, the wall bay contents, and any claim connected to them. Payment would be made after Gary's inspection if the museum maintained its interest. Martha read the page once. "You want the benefit of the inspection without paying for it. I'm giving you guaranteed money after the collection passes inspection. You'd avoid legal costs. There aren't any legal costs yet. There will be if everyone digs in." Martha slid the proposal back into the envelope. "No. You didn't even think about it. I've been thinking since you put auction papers on this table." Sean left the envelope where it was. "The museum offer gave you a number," he said. "Now you think the whole thing is yours. The will gave me the cabinet. The planes weren't in the cabinet. They were secured behind it, in a wall Dad built." Martha met his eyes. "Then bring your questions Thursday." Sean stood. "I will," he said. "And I'm bringing someone who understands what those words actually mean." After he left, Martha added his proposal to the ownership file. It did not prove the collection was hers. It proved Sean knew exactly what he was trying to acquire. Lauren called before Martha had put away the dinner dishes. "Sean sent me his proposal," she said. "He offered to buy something he says I don't own. He says it would avoid a fight. It would give him a large collection for $40,000. He'd split it with me." Martha dried a plate and placed it in the cupboard. "Did you ask him to?" "No." "Do you want him to?" Lauren hesitated. "I want us to stop treating each other like opposing sides. Then tell me what you believe." "I believe Dad bought those tools. That isn't in dispute. I believe he hid them in a wall. That isn't in dispute either. And I believe all 3 of us should slow down." Martha folded the dish towel over the oven handle. "What does slow down mean?" "Cancel Gary tomorrow. Give Sean time to have the will reviewed. He's had 2 years. He didn't know the bay existed. Neither did I. You changed the locks and called a museum before we understood anything. I changed the locks after Sean demanded control over property in my building." Lauren's voice sharpened. "He's scared. So am I." The words surprised them both. Martha had not said them to anyone. She had spoken about the roof, wiring, furnace, money, and her hands. Those were facts. Fear felt like a request, and she was finished asking her children to recognize what she needed before she could act. Lauren became quieter. "What are you scared of?" "That I'll spend what I have proving something. then lose the house while everybody argues over what Alan meant. We don't want you to lose the house. You suggested a condo. I thought it would be easier. For me or for you? Lauren did not answer. Martha looked through the dark kitchen window. The workshop lights were off, but the new exterior lamp shone over the red door. Did your father ever talk to you about the cabinet? She asked. Why? Because you keep saying we don't understand what he meant. Lauren took a breath. He said it was yours. When? A few times. Martha sat at the table. You never mentioned that. We all knew the will left it to you. That isn't what I asked. Lauren's chair moved at the other end of the call. She was probably at her own kitchen table, turning away from whatever she didn't want to see. The year he got sick, I asked why he kept that ugly cabinet when he'd sold better ones. He said, that wall cabinet belongs entirely to your mother. Don't let Sean clear it out. Martha pressed her thumb against the brace. Did he say what was behind it? No. I didn't know there was anything behind it. Did he call the wall mine? No. Did he mention the planes? No. Will you say what you just told me tomorrow? Lauren's reply came slowly. If somebody asks, I'm asking. That's different. No, Lauren, it's only private. Lauren went silent. Martha understood the conflict. Her daughter wanted to tell the truth without becoming responsible for what truth changed. She wanted Martha and Sean to work out ownership, while she remained the reasonable person in the middle. Martha had trained her well. Gary is coming, Martha said. You decide whether you are. She ended the call without anger, which made the boundary feel harder. At 8 the next morning, Kathleen called. I received a letter late yesterday from an attorney representing your son, she said. Martha looked at the clock. Gary was expected at 10. What does it say? That Sean and Lauren may claim an interest in the collection as omitted estate property. The letter asks the museum to cease acquisition activity until ownership is resolved. Lauren didn't authorize that. I can't determine family authorization. I can only respond to notice of a dispute. What happens to your offer? It is suspended. Not withdrawn, but the committee will take no action until title is clear. And Gary? The museum can no longer retain him for this inspection while the ownership objection is active. Martha held the phone tighter with her left hand. You arranged the appointment? Yes, he can still perform an independent assessment if you hire him directly. That would separate his findings from our acquisition process. How much? Kathleen gave her the fee. It covered travel, examination, testing, and a written report. The amount was less than the temporary roof work and large enough to matter. If Gary found the planes inauthentic, Martha would receive no museum money and no refund. Does Sean's letter prevent Gary from entering my workshop? No. It changes who pays and what the museum can do with his report. Will you still attend? If all parties agree, I would attend as an observer, not as the person directing the inspection. Martha looked at the blue folder. The roof tarp snapped softly above the kitchen. I'll call Gary, she said. She reached him at his office. He had already heard from Kathleen and had not yet begun the drive to Pittsburgh. I can come, he said, but I need written authorization from the property owner and payment at the appointment. I can provide both. Is anyone claiming the objects are unsafe to examine? No. Has anyone removed or altered them since the photographs? No. Then I'll be there at 10. Martha wrote his fee in her checkbook. After inspections, emergency repairs, electrical work, locks, and Gary, her savings would be reduced to the amount she had once considered untouchable. Alan used to call it the sleep money. It was what let them sleep when a customer paid late or a machine failed. Martha tore out the check. At 9, Sean arrived with Lauren and a woman carrying a leather folder. The woman introduced herself as an attorney Sean had consulted. She did not claim to represent Lauren or the estate. Her purpose was limited and clear. She had written the museum letter and wanted Martha to postpone the inspection. They met at the kitchen table because the workshop was not yet warm. The attorney read from Alan's will without offering an opinion on who would ultimately win. She pointed out that the equipment and inventory passed to the children, while the cabinet passed to Martha. The wall bay had not appeared on the estate inventory. That creates a question, she said. It creates a location nobody knew about, Martha replied. Yes. The question is whether the contents follow the business assets or the cabinet bequest. Sean folded his arms. Exactly. Martha opened her certified copy. There are additional words after the cabinet. I've reviewed them, the attorney said. They are relevant. They may be decisive. They still have to be applied to an unusual physical arrangement. That was the most the woman would say. Authority had not entered Martha's kitchen to save anyone. The will contained the rule. The family still had to face what the rule meant. Lauren sat with both hands in her lap. Martha turned to her. "Tell her what Alan said." Sean looked between them. "What did he say?" Lauren's eyes filled, though she did not cry. "He told me the cabinet belonged entirely to Mom." "We know that," Sean said. "He told me not to let you clear it out." Sean stared at his sister. "When?" "When he was sick." "And you waited until now?" "I didn't know about the wall. You knew he was protecting something. I thought he was protecting her cabinet." Sean stood so quickly that his chair struck the floor behind him. "You've been siding with her this whole time." "No. I've been trying not to side with anybody." "That worked out well." The attorney closed her folder. "This conversation is moving outside what I can help with." Sean did not pick up the chair. Martha did. The motion pulled at her back, but she set it upright without asking Fred, who had just entered through the rear door. Sean saw the checkbook beside Martha's folder. "You're paying Gary yourself?" "Yes." "How much?" "That's my business." "No, it isn't. You're spending money to build a case against us. I'm paying to find out whether the collection is what the museum believes." "The museum already suspended the offer, because you asked them to. I protected our claim. You protected your chance to buy mine for $40,000. Sean's attorney looked at him. He had apparently not told her about the proposal. His face changed. "That offer was a settlement," he said, "before authentication. You could have taken guaranteed money and given up everything else. You're gambling your savings because Dad wrote a strange sentence in a will." Martha looked at the certified pages. The clause could secure her independence. Using it would also force both children to accept that Alan had deliberately placed something valuable beyond their inheritance. No amount of careful language would make that painless. She could take Sean's offer and preserve the appearance that the family had reached a compromise. Sean would receive the collection. Lauren would receive half of whatever he chose to share. Martha could patch part of the roof and continue asking what she could afford next. Or she could pay for scrutiny and let Alan's exact decision stand, even if Sean called it rejection. Fred removed his coat. "What needs setting up?" he asked. "The temporary bench," Martha said. "Gary needs clear light on both sides." Sean stepped toward the door. "If you go ahead, I'll challenge the sale." "There is no sale." "You know what I mean." "Yes." Martha put the signed check into an envelope. "I'm going ahead." The attorney left first. Sean followed without speaking to Lauren. Lauren remained seated, shaken by what her admission had cost. "I didn't want him to hear it that way," she said. "There was never going to be a good way. He may not speak to me now. He may not speak to me either." Lauren looked at the envelope in Martha's hand. "Is this worth that?" "I don't know yet." At 10, Gary Webb arrived carrying 2 instrument cases and a portable lamp. Kathleen pulled in behind him. Martha unlocked the workshop and led them to the folding bench. She handed Gary the check, her written authorization, and Alan's index. Sean's notice had taken away the museum's backing and turned authentication into Martha's risk. She accepted that price without asking anyone in the room to approve it. Then she opened the office and brought out the first plane. Gary set it beneath the portable lamp and adjusted the light until the maker's stamp showed clearly. He did not begin with price. He began with wood. He examined the grain, end wear, wedge, iron, and narrow fence. He measured the molding profile and compared it with Alan's drawing. Then he checked the paper label against the first index entry. "How was this stored before the wall bay?" he asked. "I don't know," Martha said. Fred answered from across the bench. "Alan kept some older planes in a locked tool chest. He never let us use them. Did you see this one? Not closely enough to swear to it." Gary wrote that down. Kathleen stood near the office window and spoke only when Gary asked about museum records. Lauren kept the pattern books in order. Martha turned pages for Gary. Because the brace made lifting planes awkward, the inspection moved slowly. Gary used magnification on the stamps and a small light that revealed repairs beneath old finish. He compared oxidation on the irons with wear inside the plane bodies. He checked whether dust and polish had collected naturally around stamped letters. At the 6th plane, he stopped. "This wedge is later," he said. Sean would have heard damage in that sentence. Martha heard a fact. "Does Alan's ledger mention it?" she asked. Lauren found the matching entry. Near the bottom, Alan had written that the original wedge was split when purchased. A replacement had been shaped from old beech and left unstained. Gary examined the replacement again. That matches. Does it hurt authenticity? Martha asked. No. An undocumented replacement might raise a question. A documented repair is part of the object's history. The same thing happened with a plane whose heel had been rebuilt. Allen had recorded the damage, the repair date, and the direction of the grain in the inserted wood. Fred read the note twice. He never worked this carefully on our shop records. He did, Martha said, just not where we were looking. Near noon, Gary asked for a break. Martha made coffee in the kitchen and brought sandwiches to the workshop. They ate at the folding bench after the planes were covered. Lauren stood near the portable heater with her paper cup. Should I call Sean? She asked. He knows the inspection is happening, Martha said. He should hear the result directly. He chose to leave. He was angry. So were you. Lauren stared into her coffee. I stayed. Yes. The word carried more recognition than comfort. Lauren seemed to understand that. Kathleen approached Martha near the office door. Gary may need another 3 hours. Take what he needs. If his opinion is favorable, the remaining problem is title. I know. Our counsel reviewed the certified page you sent this morning. Martha had emailed only the relevant page and filing seal before Gary arrived. What did they say? That the language is specific enough for the museum to consider. Sean's notice still prevents us from relying on your interpretation alone. Would Lauren withdrawing her claim help? It would narrow the dispute. Lauren heard her name and turned. I never hired Sean's lawyer, she said. I didn't know he put me in the letter until this morning. Kathleen kept her tone neutral. You can correct that in writing. Lauren looked at Martha. Should I? It would have been easy to say yes. Lauren's withdrawal would leave Sean alone. Her statement about Allen's repeated instruction would make his claim look weaker. Martha could use the distance already opening between them and push until Sean had no family support. That might shorten the argument. It would also ask Lauren to prove loyalty by publicly rejecting her brother. Martha had spent years moving messages between her children. She was not going to replace that pattern with making one a witness against the other. Write only what's true, she said. You didn't authorize the letter. You know the cabinet was left to me. You didn't know about the bay. And what do I say about ownership? That you want the will applied as written. Lauren held the coffee cup with both hands. Sean will say, I'm siding with you. Then tell him yourself before you sign anything. That gives him time to pressure me. Yes. Lauren looked surprised. Martha continued. You asked for time because you wanted everybody to slow down. I won't deny him the same thing because it benefits me. Kathleen returned to the bench without commenting. Lauren stepped into the covered walkway and called Sean. Through the glass, Martha could see her pacing between the house and workshop. The conversation lasted almost 15 minutes. When Lauren came back, her face was pale. He says if I withdraw, he'll have to challenge a loan. That's true. He says Dad intended the business assets for us, and the collection was part of the business. What do you believe? I believe Dad went out of his way to put the cabinet in your will. That isn't the whole question. No. Lauren set down her empty cup. I told him I won't claim something just because it has value. Martha did not thank her. Gratitude would make honesty sound like a favor. Is he coming back? She asked. Lauren nodded. At 3. Gary resumed with the pattern books. He laid transparent sheets over several drawn profiles and traced their curves. Then he matched those curves with cuts made by the corresponding planes. The relationships were exact enough that small irregularities in the drawings appeared in the tools. These were studied as a working system, he said. Allen didn't use them for customer molding, Fred said. No. But he understood how they worked. Gary moved to the provenance ledger. He checked ink changes, page sequence, paper wear, and the way Allen added information over time. Some entries had been revised years later when Allen found a maker's full name or corrected a town. The revisions did not look artificially aged or added at once. Gary asked whether Allen had ever tried to sell the set. Not that I know of, Martha said. Did he insure it separately? No. Discuss value with anyone? No. Fred shook his head. Lauren said, He told me the cabinet was Mom's. That's all. Gary wrote the statement in his notes, then drew a line separating it from his condition findings. My work doesn't determine title, he said. I authenticate objects and documentation. Ownership is outside my opinion. No one mistook his role after that. At 2:30, Gary inspected the last plane. He returned all 32 to their indexed order and compared the full group with the photographs Martha had taken inside the bay. He asked Fred to lower the portable lamp. Under the softer workshop lights, the planes looked less like valuable objects and more like the old working tools Sean had dismissed. That difference was part of the problem. Value had arrived from context. Remove the ledger, receipts, labels, and pattern books, and the planes would become much harder to understand. Break the set among private buyers, and Allen's work would disappear, even if every tool survived. Gary removed his glasses and cleaned them. "I can give you a preliminary opinion now," he said. "The written report will follow." Martha stood across the bench from him. "In my opinion, the group is authentic as an assembled collection of Pennsylvania molding planes. The maker's stamps, wood, wear, repairs, and working profiles are consistent with the periods represented. The index and ledger show a continuous record of collection and study." Kathleen asked, "Any material exceptions?" 2 later wedges, 1 rebuilt heel, several replaced irons. All are documented. I found no evidence of fabricated stamps, artificial aging, or recent assembly, and the provenance? Strong for a private collection. Individual early transfers vary in quality, but the continuity from Allen Perry's purchases forward is unusually complete. Martha looked toward the open bay. Allen had not left her a rumor. He had preserved a set whose history could survive examination. The relief came with a sharper cost. The collection was now worth fighting over. Sean could no longer dismiss it without also surrendering his claim to the money. His truck entered the driveway at 3:10. He came into the workshop alone and remained near the side door. "Well?" he asked. Gary repeated his conclusion in shorter form. Sean listened without interrupting. "Does that confirm the museum's number?" he asked. "No," Gary said. "I don't set purchase prices." Kathleen stepped forward. "The museum's conditional amount remains appropriate from an acquisition standpoint. The suspension remains until ownership is resolved." Sean looked at Lauren. "Did you sign something?" "Not yet, but you're going to. I'm correcting the claim made in my name." He turned to Martha. "You got what you wanted, no? I found out the set is genuine. Same thing. It isn't." Fred covered the planes again. Gary began packing his instruments, but Kathleen asked him to remain until the documents were reviewed. His authentication had removed one uncertainty. It had not decided who could sell. Martha went to the office and brought out the ownership file. She could have included Sean's $40,000 proposal, his calls, and the auction record showing how quickly he had sold Allen's equipment. None of those things decided title. Displaying them would only expose his debts and make retreat harder. She left the proposal in the file. On the folding bench, she placed the certified will, probate inventory, photographs of the bolted cabinet, and Allen's note. The cabinet itself remained on the hydraulic cart beside the open bay. Sean pulled out a chair. "If you use Dad's will to take the whole collection," he said, "don't tell yourself this doesn't change anything." Martha sat opposite him. "I know exactly what it changes." Lauren took the chair beside Sean, though she did not move closer to him. Fred stood near Martha. Kathleen and Gary remained at the end of the bench. Martha did not ask Sean to withdraw his notice. She did not offer him money for peace. She had spent too many years paying, explaining, and smoothing the path back to the same family pattern. She opened the certified will to Allen's bequest and turned the page so everyone could read it. Sean leaned over the page but did not touch it. The bequest was 1 paragraph. Allen had named the cabinet by location, described how it was fixed to the rear workshop wall, and granted it to Martha. Sean read the first lines aloud. "The wall cabinet," he said. "That's the wooden cabinet. We agree about that." "Keep reading," Martha said. He stopped before the final phrase. Lauren read it instead. "And all contents secured within or behind it." The workshop became quiet except for the portable heater. Sean looked at the open wall bay. Then he looked at the cabinet resting on the hydraulic cart. "That can't mean the wall," he said. "It doesn't give me the wall. He left us the business inventory." "Yes, these are tools he bought for the business," Gary answered before Martha could. "I found no evidence that this set was used as ordinary business inventory. It was separately labeled, documented, and secured." Sean turned on him. "You said you don't determine ownership. I don't. I can describe the collection, then describe it without taking sides." "I just did." Sean placed both hands on the folding bench. "The will says cabinet. It doesn't say collection. It doesn't say molding planes. Dad left his equipment and inventory to Lauren and me. These are equipment." Martha let him finish. He needed to commit to the version that had brought him this far. In that version, Alan's broad business bequest swallowed everything that looked like a tool. The cabinet bequest gave Martha an empty wooden shell because the more valuable interpretation had not mattered until now. Sean continued. Dad probably forgot they were back there. Or he meant to move them. That note isn't a will. No, Martha said. The note is an instruction. It doesn't transfer ownership. No, the business transfer does. Martha placed one photograph beside the certified page. It showed the cabinet before removal, bolted through its base and back. The orange auction card remained tied to the handle. She placed a second photograph beside it. That one showed the shallow bay exposed directly behind the cabinet. Then she pointed to the final words of the bequest. The transfer is here. Sean shook his head. That's your interpretation? It is the sentence Alan filed. He used a vague phrase. Within or behind is not vague. It is when there's a wall involved. Martha looked at Kathleen. What does the museum require? A certified bequest, a clear match between the described property and the objects offered for sale, and no unresolved notice that someone else claims title. Does this match? Kathleen considered the papers before answering. The cabinet is identified by its workshop location. The photographs show the bay immediately behind it. Gary inspected the objects recovered from that bay. Alan's index and note connect the set to that secured location. But, Jean asked, but your notice remains. The museum can rely on the clause if the notice is withdrawn. If you maintain a claim, we will wait for a court to apply the clause. Authority had confirmed the rule without rescuing Martha from its cost. She could sell under the bequest if the dispute ended. She could not force the museum to ignore Sean's threat. Sean took out his phone. I'm calling my attorney. Martha sat back. Call her. He stepped away from the table, but remained in the workshop. Everyone heard his side of the conversation. She produced a certified copy, he said. Yes, the same clause. He listened. No, the planes were in a bay behind the cabinet. Another pause. The bay was sealed. The cabinet was bolted over it. He walked toward the side door. Because Dad left us all the shop tools. The attorney spoke long enough that Sean stopped moving. What if they were omitted from the inventory? He listened again. So, the specific language wins? His voice had lost its force. Lauren looked at Martha. Fred lowered his eyes toward the floor, giving Sean what privacy was possible in an empty workshop. Sean ended the call and returned to the bench. What did she say? Lauren asked. She said the specific bequest likely controls. Likely? She's a lawyer. They say likely. Martha closed the certified will, but kept one hand on it. Are you withdrawing the notice? Sean looked at the covered planes. Dad left us every machine in this building, and you sold them. That doesn't mean he wanted you to have this. It means he wrote exactly where this belonged. He could have told us. Yes. He could have split it. Yes. But he didn't. No. The last word hurt Sean more than any accusation could have. Martha saw it in the way his shoulders dropped. His fight had been about money, but not only money. Alan had trusted him with the visible business and trusted Martha with something he had protected for decades. Sean could turn that into favoritism or punishment. The clause would remain the same. Lauren unfolded Alan's note and set it near him. He told me not to let you clear out the cabinet, she said. I should have said that before the auction. Sean looked at her. Would you have stopped it? I don't know. That's convenient. No, it's the truth. He pushed the note back toward Martha. What happens if I don't withdraw? The museum waits, Kathleen said. And Mom spends money fighting me, Martha answered. We both do. You can afford it if this sells. It can't sell while you stop it. Sean rubbed both hands over his face. Martha could have taken his proposal from the ownership file. She could have laid $40,000 beside $310,000 and made everyone watch him explain the difference. She could have listed every loan she had given him and asked why his emergency always became a family duty. None of that was necessary. The collection is mine, she said. Your debts don't make you dishonest, Sean. They also don't make this yours. He stared at her. You knew about the debts? I knew enough. Lauren told you. You told me every time you made urgency do the talking. His mouth tightened. So that's it? You keep everything. I'm selling the Pennsylvania set intact if the museum completes its offer. And the money will repair my house and workshop. The rest will secure my future. You won't share it. I won't distribute it to make this sentence easier. Sean looked at Lauren. You're fine with that? Lauren's answer took time. I'm not fine, she said. I believe it's hers. The difference mattered. Nobody left the table happy. They were finally saying what they believed instead of what might end the conversation. Kathleen placed a withdrawal form beside Sean. It did not release future family claims in general. It withdrew his notice to the museum concerning this collection and acknowledged that Alan's specific cabinet bequest covered the objects secured in the bay behind it. Sean read every line. You brought this prepared, he said. I brought it in case the title question was resolved, Kathleen replied. It was resolved before I got here, wasn't it? No, Martha said. You had to read the clause. He picked up the pen. For a moment, Martha thought he would put it down and leave. Instead, he signed his name. Lauren signed a separate statement correcting the earlier claim made on her behalf. Kathleen checked both pages and called the museum's counsel. She read the filing information from the certified will, confirmed Gary's preliminary authentication, and sent photographs of the signed withdrawals. While she waited for a response, Gary completed his condition summary. He listed the documented repairs and confirmed that all 32 indexed planes remained present. He signed the preliminary report and gave copies to Martha and Kathleen. Sean remained seated. He no longer had a claim to argue, but leaving would have made the loss look like defeat. Staying forced him to watch the consequence of a decision Alan had made without him. Kathleen's phone rang. She listened, asked one question, and ended the call. The title condition is satisfied, she said. She opened her document case and removed the purchase agreement. The museum would buy the complete Pennsylvania molding plane collection for $310,000. The acquired material was listed piece by piece. All 32 signed planes were included, along with Alan's index, provenance ledger, purchase receipts, labels, and pattern books. Martha read the exclusions carefully. Alan's everyday planes were not included. Neither were the sharpening stones, jigs, cabinet scrapers, molding samples, or other working tools recovered from the wall cabinet. The cabinet stays? She asked. Yes, Kathleen said. The museum is purchasing the documented set, not the cabinet or bay. And Alan's name? The catalog record will identify Alan Perry as the collector and compiler of the archive. Your name will appear in the acquisition history as the person who preserved and transferred it intact. Martha looked at the signature line. The amount could replace the roof, wiring, and heating system. It could restore the workshop without placing a loan against the house. It could also allow Martha to stop treating every repair job as protection against disaster. Selling meant the planes would leave Perry Road. The wall bay would be empty. Alan's handwriting would go with the collection. Martha touched the oilcloth packet. Will the note stay with the index? Yes. Then I'm ready. She signed. Kathleen signed for the museum. The agreement required payment by bank transfer before the collection left the property. Gary's final written report would be attached to the acquisition record, but his preliminary authentication satisfied the purchase condition. Sean stood. I hope you know what you're doing. Martha closed her copy of the agreement. I do. He left through the side door. Lauren started after him, then stopped. Should I go? She asked. That's your decision. Lauren remained long enough to help return the planes to the locked office. She did not ask Martha to reconsider the sale. She did not ask about the money. Gary packed his instruments and left. After giving Martha instructions on temperature and handling, his work was finished. Kathleen stayed to arrange transportation and insurance. The museum would send a small collections team after payment cleared. Until then, Martha remained responsible for keeping the set intact. The next 4 days were ordinary in ways Martha did not expect. The roof tarp lifted in the wind. The portable heater needed resetting each morning. She repaired the split lid on the walnut box and called 2 contractors back for revised estimates. Sean did not call. Lauren sent one message asking whether the bank transfer had arrived. Martha answered no. On Tuesday morning, Martha was sanding the walnut box by hand when her bank called. The museum transfer had been received and verified. $310,000 now stood in an account under Martha's name. She sat at the folding bench after the call and placed both hands flat on the rubber mat. Her right thumb still hurt inside the brace. The light above her remained steady on the repaired circuit. Fred came in carrying coffee. Well, he asked. It cleared. He set the cups down carefully. Roof first, roof, wiring, heat, insulation, then the shop. In that order? In the order that keeps us dry and alive. Fred smiled. The museum team arrived that afternoon. Kathleen supervised as each plane was matched to its index number, wrapped, and placed into a fitted transport case. The records went into document boxes. The pattern books were supported with flat boards so their bindings would not shift. Martha checked every number before signing the transfer sheet. When the final case was closed, Kathleen gave her the museum's receipt for the complete collection. "Would you like a moment before we load?" she asked. Martha looked at the cases. "No, keep them together." The team carried them through the side door. The truck waited where auction buyers had parked less than a month earlier. That day, nothing left, because someone had mistaken age for junk or urgency for authority. The set left under Alan's index, Martha's signature, and a museum's duty to preserve it. After the truck departed, Martha returned to the workshop. The shallow bay stood empty behind the cabinet. On the folding bench lay Alan's everyday tools, the ones the museum had not purchased. She picked up his worn smoothing plane and set it beside her new repair folder. Then she called the roofing contractor and authorized the first stage of work. He returned the next morning with a crew, rolls of roofing felt, and a truck full of shingles. Martha moved the customer furniture into her dining room again. The walnut box went on top of the china cabinet, safely out of the dust. She covered the folding bench and Alan's everyday tools with heavy plastic. Work began above her head. For 3 days, boots crossed the roof from morning until late afternoon. Rotten sections of decking came down in pieces. New wood went up. The cracked flashing was removed, and the temporary tarp disappeared into the contractor's truck. Martha watched every change and approved every invoice before payment. The electrician followed. He replaced the damaged panel, separated the house circuits from the workshop circuits, and rewired the upstairs bedrooms. New outlets went into the finishing area. Each was labeled at the panel in clear handwriting. The heating contractor replaced the failing furnace and added a separate efficient unit for the workshop. The old heater left a dark rectangle on the wall and a pile of rust beneath its vent. By the end of the first week, Martha's kitchen table held contracts, permits, material samples, and payment schedules. The complete work totaled $82,000. She transferred that amount into a separate renovation account. She also set aside money for taxes, insurance, and future building costs. What remained was not treated as available family cash. Sean learned that when he came to the house on Friday evening, he called first. Martha let him in through the kitchen. He noticed the new lock immediately but said nothing about it. The roof work had ended for the day. Bundles of unused shingles sat beneath a tarp in the driveway. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cut wood and electrical dust. Sean placed a folded paper on the table. "I withdrew everything," he said. Martha opened it. His attorney had confirmed in writing that he would not challenge the museum purchase or Martha's ownership of the proceeds. "Thank you," she said. "It's not a favor." "No." The lawyer said I didn't have a case. Martha refolded the paper. "That's different from accepting the sale. I accept that it wasn't mine to make. The sentence cost him something. He did not offer more." Martha put the letter in the ownership file. Sean looked toward the contractor folders. "You're really spending $82,000 on this place." "Yes, you could buy something newer." "I could?" "Still don't want to." "No." He moved a stack of wiring estimates and sat down. "My bank extended one line of credit," he said. "Short term." Martha waited. "I'm selling one of the company vans. Will that cover payroll?" "Most of it." "And the late customers?" "One paid." "I put the other on a schedule." This was the first time Sean had described his business problem without turning it into a request. Martha poured coffee for both of them. She did not ask if he needed money. He did not ask her to offer. After a while, he said, "I thought the auction would fix more. It fixed what money could fix, not enough of it." "No." He drank half his coffee before speaking again. "I'm still angry with Dad, I know. You, yes, for leaving it to you, for leaving me to find it this way." Sean looked toward the covered walkway. Workers had removed several ceiling panels, exposing wiring and framing. "He should have told somebody," he said. "He told Lauren enough to protect the cabinet, not enough to stop us." Martha did not rescue him from that sentence. Sean had helped arrange the auction because he needed speed. Lauren had allowed it because she wanted distance. Martha had spent 2 years waiting for them to recognize the workshop as part of her future. Alan's silence had created the conditions, but it had not made their decisions. Sean finished his coffee and stood. I won't ask you for money, he said. That needs to be true next month, too. His face hardened slightly. I said I won't. And I'm telling you the boundary isn't temporary. He picked up his coat. Do I have to make an appointment every time I come? You have to call. I'm your son. Yes. This time, neither of them used the word to erase what came before it. He left without a hug. Martha watched him walk around the roofing materials to his truck. His acceptance had changed the dispute. It had not restored trust. Lauren arrived Saturday morning wearing old jeans and carrying 2 paint trays. Martha met her at the workshop door. You bought paint? Primer? I didn't choose a color. The walls aren't ready. I can prepare them. Do you know how? No. The answer was immediate. That was different. Fred was inside marking damaged plaster and old nail holes. He pointed Lauren toward a stack of drop cloths and showed her how to scrape loose paint without gouging the wood beneath it. Lauren tied back her hair and worked for an hour before asking when they would be finished. Not today, Fred said. I meant the whole room. So did I. By lunchtime, her shoulders hurt. Dust covered her shoes and the front of her shirt. She sat on an overturned bucket and ate the sandwich she had brought. Martha sorted molding samples nearby. Her right hand remained braced. A medical appointment had confirmed arthritis and a strained tendon. She could keep working, but she had to rest the joint and change how she gripped tools. Lauren watched her move a box with both hands. I should have told you what Dad said, she said. Yes. I didn't understand it mattered. It mattered before we found the planes. I know that now. Martha placed the box on a shelf. Lauren waited for forgiveness. Not a speech, only a sentence that would let her believe the damage had been repaired by admitting it. Martha did not give her one. Are you coming back next Saturday? She asked. Yes. Then wear gloves. That scraper will blister your hand. Lauren nodded. She returned to the wall. She came back the following Saturday and the Saturday after that. On the second visit, she brought gloves. On the third, she arrived with a thermos for all 3 of them and did not ask how much longer the work would take. The old paint came off in uneven strips. Lauren filled nail holes, sanded rough patches, and wiped dust from the walls before primer. She did not post photographs or tell relatives she was helping. She did not refer to the work as making things right. Martha noticed all of that. Fred's arrangement changed too. Until the museum payment, he had refused money for helping with the cabinet. Once the restoration began, Martha placed a written job offer on the folding bench. Fred read it twice. Shop foreman? You've done the work before. I'm retired. You complain like a retired man. You still arrive before me. He read the hourly rate and proposed schedule. This is too much. It's a fair rate. You're paying me out of Allen's Plains. I'm paying you from my business account. Fred looked at her over the page. Business account? Yes. What business? Perry Furniture Repair. He smiled. Sounds familiar. It isn't. The written offer covered 3 days each week during restoration, then flexible paid hours after reopening. Fred would supervise equipment installation, safety procedures, and 2 apprenticeship benches. Who are the apprentices, he asked. We haven't hired them. You put benches in an agreement before finding people? I put work in the room before deciding who's allowed to learn it. Fred looked toward the open wall bay. And my vice? Still yours. If I mount it here, it remains yours. We'll put it in writing. You've become difficult. I was always difficult. I used to do extra work so nobody noticed. Fred signed. His vice came out of the hall closet the next day. Before mounting it, Martha photographed the stamped initials and purchase numbers. She entered it in a property log as personally owned by Fred and used by the business with his permission. Fred laughed when she asked him to sign the entry. You planning another auction? I'm planning for nobody to argue later. They bolted the vise to a new bench near the restored circuit. The work exposed further damage. Once the old wall covering came down, the contractors found insulation compressed around the former bay and air gaps along the sill. Repairing it fit within the contingency allowance, but it delayed the finishing room. For 2 weeks, Martha had no usable work area. She called the Walnut Box customer and moved the collection date. She returned a deposit on another repair, rather than promise a deadline she could not meet. The customer was disappointed, but accepted her explanation. That lost job mattered. The museum money could pay for the building, but a repair business survived on trust and completed work. Martha wrote the returned deposit in the ledger, instead of pretending the delay had cost nothing. She also learned that restoration required decisions Allen had once made alone. Where should the dust collection run? Which benches needed fixed power? How wide should the clear path remain for carrying a dining table? Should the finishing room have a separate exhaust fan or rely on the old window? Martha answered what she knew and asked questions where she did not. Age gave her experience. It did not give her every trade. Fred disagreed about the bench layout. "You're putting the apprenticeship benches too close to finishing," he said. "The light is better there. The fumes aren't. With the new exhaust? Still too close." Martha moved the benches on the plan. Fred studied her. "Alan would have argued for 3 days. I know. You could at least give me an afternoon." "No." The repaired roof held through the next hard rain. Martha went upstairs during the storm and stood beneath the old ceiling stain. The dishpan remained in the closet. In the workshop, new wiring ran behind finished walls. The heating unit started with a low hum instead of a knock. Warm air reached the former finishing room and the empty bay behind the cabinet. The cabinet itself waited on padded blocks. Its doors had been removed, and its base carried bright marks where the seized bolts had been cut. Martha did not hide those marks. She sanded the splintered edges, stabilized the weakened wood, and prepared patches that matched without pretending the damage had never happened. Lauren arrived with primer and asked where to begin. Martha handed her a brush and pointed to the wall that had once stood behind Alan's machines. "From the window," she said. "Work toward the cabinet." Lauren opened the paint can, stirred slowly, and started where Martha told her. By late afternoon, the fresh primer covered half the room. Lauren cleaned her brush at the utility sink and wiped the rim of the can before replacing the lid. She had learned that from watching Martha the week before. "I can come Sunday," she said. "The contractor will be sanding the floor. Monday evening, if you call first." Lauren nodded. She had not asked for a new key. Martha had not offered one. On Monday, Lauren called from work and arranged to arrive at 6. She painted until 8, cleaned her tools, and asked where Martha wanted them stored. The question was small. The old Lauren would have left them wherever she finished and assumed Martha would put them away. "Bottom shelf by the sink," Martha said. That pattern continued through the restoration. Lauren did not arrive unannounced. Martha did not prepare dinner every time she came. Some evenings they worked together without discussing the auction, Alan or Sean. The walls became a soft, warm gray. The red exterior door received 2 new coats. Fred installed bright task lights over the folding bench and the future apprenticeship stations. When the contractors finished, the final cost remained $82,000. Martha inspected the work, approved the last payment, and received copies of every warranty. The roof no longer leaked. The upstairs outlets worked. The furnace started quietly. The workshop had safe power, steady heat, insulated walls, a clean finishing room, and dust collection that Fred could operate without crawling beneath a machine. Martha did not replace every piece of equipment sold at auction. She bought what the repair work required: a reliable bandsaw, a small drill press, sanders with proper dust fittings, a sharpening station at a height that did not force her to bend over. Heavy machines that belonged to cabinet production stayed absent. The open floor made room for furniture, carts, and people. Fred helped rebuild the wall where the bay had been. They removed the empty rack, repaired the insulation, and installed a solid interior panel. Nothing was concealed behind it. The scarred cabinet remained on padded blocks until Martha's hand improved. She patched the cut areas along its base and replaced the damaged back rail. The old gray paint stayed. She cleaned it, stabilized the loose surface, and applied a clear protective finish. New wall brackets held the cabinet securely. Their screws were visible from inside, and each could be removed with an ordinary wrench. "No mystery bolts?" Fred asked. "No mystery anything." He lifted one cabinet door while Martha aligned the hinge. The cord loop was still attached where a brass pull had once been. Lauren offered to buy a matching replacement. Martha shook her head. "Alan used that cord for years. So we keep it? We keep it because it works." Once the doors were back, Martha returned the everyday tools to their shelves. The sharpening stones went on the left. The smoothing plane and block plane went where she could reach them without stretching. Jars of screws were labeled, instead of grouped by whatever coffee Alan had been drinking when he filled them. A copy of the museum's final receipt went into the office file. The original stayed in Martha's locked document box inside the house. Kathleen sent the completed catalog records several weeks later. It named Allen as the collector and described the continuous ledger he had maintained. It also recorded that Martha preserved the set after finding it secured behind the wall cabinet. Martha printed one copy. She did not frame it or hang it in the workshop. She placed it in the office beside the business records. Allen's collection had a proper home at the museum. His working tools remained where work could reach them. The first apprenticeship applicants came for interviews before the shop reopened. Martha hired 2 adults, Nia and Ben, for paid part-time positions. Nia had repaired theater scenery and wanted to learn furniture finishing. Ben had worked as a cabinet installer but had never built or restored a joint by hand. Fred reviewed machine safety. Martha taught surface preparation, glue selection, and the habit of photographing furniture before removing anything. On the first morning, Ben reached for sandpaper before checking the finish. Martha stopped him. "What do you know about that surface?" she asked. "It's scratched. That's what you see." "What do you know?" He looked more closely. "Not enough." "Good. Start there." She showed him how to test a hidden area. Nia recorded the result on the work order. Neither apprentice worked for exposure or future promises. Martha paid them for every scheduled hour, including cleanup and instruction. Their names appeared in the payroll records beside Fred's. Fred complained about the paperwork until his first check arrived exactly when promised. "I'd have helped anyway," he said. "That's why the check matters." The shop opened without a ceremony. Martha turned on the red door's exterior lamp, placed a small sign beside the walkway, and unlocked at 8. The furniture dealer from the auction brought in a damaged sideboard. The customer with the walnut box returned with 2 dining chairs. A neighbor asked whether Martha could repair a loose stair railing and accepted when she explained that the shop handled furniture, not house carpentry. By noon, the workboard held 5 jobs. Martha's hands still limited her. She could not scrape for hours or lift chairs alone. She used clamps, padded carts, and shorter work periods. Nia handled some finish removal under supervision. Ben moved heavy pieces with Fred. Martha's judgment became the work she contributed most. That required adjustment. She had once measured a useful day by what her own hands completed. Now, a useful day might include correcting a repair plan, showing Nia how amber shellac changed walnut, or stopping Ben before he removed original hardware. The results still carried her standards. Sean called during the second week. "I have a reception desk at the warehouse," he said. "One corner got damaged during a delivery. How badly? I can send pictures. Send them to the business number." He paused. "Can you look at it?" "Yes. Looking is free. Repair isn't." "I know." He sent the photographs. Martha prepared the same written estimate she would have given anyone else, including labor, materials, deposit, and collection date. Sean came by at the time they arranged. He walked through the side door after Martha opened it. The changed workshop unsettled him. His eyes moved from the new wiring to the apprenticeship benches and then to the restored cabinet. "You put it back," he said. "Yes." He did not open it. At the folding bench, he read the repair estimate. "This labor rate includes the apprentices. It includes the shop. Can you do it sooner?" "No." He signed and paid the deposit. That was all. He did not apologize for the auction. Martha did not reduce the price to reward him for asking properly. When the desk was finished, Sean inspected the repaired corner and paid the remaining balance. Ben helped him load it into the company van. At the door, Sean said, "The shop looks good. Thank you. Dad wouldn't have arranged it this way." "No," he almost smiled. "I suppose that's the point." Martha did not agree or disagree. Sean had accepted that the sale and its proceeds were not his. Whether he could build a different relationship with her would depend on what he did after acceptance. He called before his next visit. Lauren's repair moved differently. She kept returning after the painting was finished. Sometimes Martha gave her work. Sometimes there was none. One Saturday, Lauren brought lunch and found Martha reviewing apprentice applications in the office. "You don't need help today?" she asked. "Not with the shop." Lauren placed the food on the desk. "Can I stay anyway?" "Yes." They ate without discussing forgiveness. Months after the auction, Lauren asked whether Martha still kept the old cardboard name tag. "It's in the cabinet," Martha said. "Why?" "Because it was accurate." Lauren looked toward the gray doors. "I'm sorry you had to tie your name to something in your own building." Martha closed the payroll ledger. "I believe you." It was not the same as saying everything was repaired. Lauren understood and stayed to help prepare the finishing room for Monday. Fred's knee became less reliable in cold weather. He reduced his schedule to 2 days each week and wrote the change into his agreement. Nia learned to match old finish without darkening repaired areas. Ben completed his first chair joint after Martha made him take it apart and redo it. "You knew it would fail?" he asked. "Yes." "Why let me finish it?" "You needed to see why." He never forgot the difference between a joint that looked closed and one that held. The workshop began paying its regular expenses. Martha kept the museum proceeds separate from operating money. Customer payments covered wages, materials, utilities, insurance, and maintenance. She no longer needed the children to call it her work. The checks carried the business name. The work orders carried her decisions. The keys remained under her control. On an autumn afternoon, Kathleen visited with 2 museum staff members to see the restored shop. She stood before the cabinet and ran one gloved finger near the patch base without touching it. "You kept the saw marks," she said. "They're part of what happened." Kathleen told Martha that the Pennsylvania set had been fully cataloged. Several planes would appear in a regional woodworking display the following spring, with the complete records available to researchers. "Alan would have liked the tools being studied," Fred said. "He would have complained about the labels," Martha replied. Kathleen laughed. Before leaving, she purchased a small repaired writing box from the shop's front shelf. Martha gave her a receipt, not a gift. Winter tested the building more honestly than any inspection. Snow settled over the new roof. The furnace ran through 2 nights of hard cold. No buckets appeared upstairs. No lights flickered. Warm air reached both apprenticeship benches. The shop stayed open. If stories about reclaiming dignity after family abandonment matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. At closing time, Nia swept beneath her bench while Ben wrapped a repaired chair for morning collection. Fred checked the heater and returned his engraving tools to the vice drawer. Lauren had left an hour earlier after calling to ask whether Martha needed groceries. Sean's reception desk stood at his warehouse, repaired and paid for. Martha entered the final customer payment in the ledger. She locked the office file, switched off the finishing room fan, and carried her coffee cup to the sink. The old smoothing plane rested on the center shelf. Beside it sat the cardboard tag with Martha's name, its edges softened by handling. She placed the tag flat beneath the plane and checked that the sharpening stones were dry. Behind her, Nia and Ben discussed the next morning's work. Fred turned off the front lights, leaving the task lamps above the benches. Martha took hold of the cord loop Alan had used in place of a brass pull. The doors met evenly after their repair. Martha closed the restored cabinet, while warm light fell across the occupied workbenches in the workshop behind her home.